Chapter 47-78. Since the Universe God Emperor didn't want to fight and was willing to negotiate, the Immortal God Emperor naturally wouldn't refuse. In any case, the two sides were evenly matched. Continuing to fight would only wear each other down and increase casualties. In addition, the Immortal God Emperor wanted to see what the Universe God Emperor wanted to talk about. The two fleets faced each other in the sky, separated by tens of thousands of miles. They were within range of the divine cannons and had plenty of time to react and dodge. In order to show his sincerity, the Universe God Emperor stepped out of the warship and stood in front of the fleet. The second and third palace masters followed him out of the ship. They stood behind the first palace master and stared at each other expressionlessly. As for the fourth, fifth, and sixth lords, they remained in the warship to recover from their injuries and didn't show themselves. Seeing that the other side was in position, the Immortal God Emperor leisurely stepped out of the warship and stood in front of the fleet. The four lords followed behind him in a row, their faces filled with arrogance as they coldly stared at the other side. The fact that both sides had reached this point in the negotiation showed that they were evenly matched and weren't willing to fight to the death. However, this was the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality, and they had the advantage in numbers. Thus, the Immortal God Emperor's lords appeared even more confident and arrogant. Immortal, although you and I haven't interacted for nearly 20,000 years, we both know each other's nature and methods, don't we? Universe God Emperor was the first to speak, calmly looking at the Immortal God Emperor. The Immortal God Emperor sneered and said in an unfriendly tone, "Old man Universe, you're stronger than us, and you're also very shrewd. All the Temple Lords are well aware of this. However, our Immortal God Emperor has never been afraid of you. You, on the other hand, are pushing your luck by invading this Emperor's territory on a large scale. If you don't give this Emperor an explanation today, don't blame this Emperor for fighting to the death with you." Even if the Immortal God Emperor knew full well that he might not be able to do anything to Tai Yu God Emperor, he had to have enough momentum. God Emperor Tai Yu knew him too well and merely smiled when he heard this. "Boom, yeah, you don't have to play dumb with this Emperor. Everyone knows that this Emperor didn't come here to fight with you and snatch your territory. If it weren't for the fact that I was chasing that brat Kenshin, why would I barge into your territory? If it weren't for Kenshin destroying your divine palace and killing your temple master, why would you muster such a large force and go to war? In the end, we have a common enemy, and that is the Kenshin." Clearly, the Space God Emperor didn't want to waste his breath on the Immortal God Emperor. He pointed out the crux of the matter in a few sentences. The Undying God Emperor frowned, clearly not expecting the other party to be so certain and say such words in front of everyone. He was gradually beginning to believe that the Space God Emperor was sincere in negotiating. Perhaps the two sides really could come up with a solution or countermeasure. Although that was what he thought, he refused to admit defeat verbally. Common enemy? To this Emperor, Kenshin is indeed an enemy. He killed my temple master and destroyed my divine palace. This Emperor won't forgive him. If I don't tear him to pieces and grind his bones to dust, how can this Emperor's hatred be appeased? As for you, Old man Tai Yu, don't think this Emperor doesn't know that you're thinking of subduing Kenshin. You just want him to work for you." The Immortal God Emperor's words pierced through Tai Yu God Emperor's thoughts. But how could the Immortal God Emperor admit that? He sneered, "Immortal, have you lost your mind? Even if this Emperor didn't say it, you've already heard that Kenshin killed a temple master in this Emperor's territory and kidnapped millions of civilians. Tell me, how can this Emperor let him go?" Heh heh. The Immortal God Emperor continued to sneer. "Is that so? So the reason why you're negotiating with me is because you want to work together with me to kill Sword God?" Tai Yu God Emperor nodded without hesitation. "Of course. Although Kenshin isn't that strong, he's crafty and cunning. He's very difficult to deal with. We have a common goal, so why can't we work together to deal with him? If we fight and wear each other down, Kenshin will only take advantage of the situation. In the end, neither of us will be able to kill him and he might even benefit from it. The immortal God Emperor stared intently at Taiyu God Emperor and observed him for a good while before revealing a meaningful smile. You're right, old man Taiyu. We should work together to deal with Kenshin instead of fighting each other. But you're not telling the truth. What you said just now isn't what you really think. That's why this emperor won't work with you. Taiyu God Emperor frowned and stroked his white beard with his right hand. Immortal, this emperor has shown enough sincerity. What more do you want? If you don't trust this emperor, then I'll give you a piece of advice. I hope you won't interfere when this emperor finds Kenshin. Otherwise, this emperor will make you regret it for the rest of your life. This was clearly a threat to the immortal God Emperor, but Taiyu God Emperor couldn't be too clear about it. In truth, he could tell the immortal God Emperor that if the immortal God Emperor refused to cooperate, this emperor would disturb the pantheon of immortality and slaughter millions of civilians. The pantheon of immortality wouldn't be able to rest in peace. But if he could do that, the immortal God Emperor could also return the favor by barging into the Taiyu Shrine's territory and doing something even worse. Just as expected. The immortal God Emperor instantly understood Taiyu God Emperor's intentions and sneered. Old Taiyu, of course this emperor can guess that you want to turn this emperor's territory upside down. But don't forget that this emperor can do what you can do. In fact, if you really do make a move, this emperor will return the favor several times over. Taiyu God Emperor was enraged by the other party's nonchalant attitude. He wanted nothing more than to kill the other party. But he knew very well that he couldn't lose his composure or lose his temper at a time like this. He also couldn't easily give up on this negotiation. He could only assume that the immortal God Emperor was intentionally provoking him or testing his sincerity. Left with no choice, Taiyu God Emperor could only rub his forehead and ask with a pained expression, "Immortal, what are you trying to do? Do we really have to talk in such an awkward manner?" The immortal God Emperor shrugged and sneered. Old Taiyu, don't get it wrong. You're the one who's playing tricks and refusing to tell this emperor the truth. How can this emperor cooperate with you? This emperor will ask you one last time. Do you want to kill Kenshin because you want to chase him or because you want to kill him? Taiyu God Emperor originally didn't want to reveal the truth and wanted to hold back until he met with Ji Tianqing. But the immortal God Emperor didn't buy it. He wanted to force the other party to speak clearly or he wouldn't give Taiyu God Emperor a promise. Taiyu God Emperor hesitated and weighed the pros and cons. In the end, he told the immortal God Emperor the truth. That's right. This emperor did come to your territory to capture Kenshin for another reason. But as for what it is, this emperor can't tell you yet. Chapter 47-79. The Taiyu God Emperor could only admit that he had other reasons for invading the pantheon of immortality's territory. However, he was unwilling to reveal the truth and his true thoughts. The immortal God Emperor didn't mince his words. Taiyu old man, don't play this game with me. Seize and seize. I know what you're thinking. But if you don't tell me, I'll take it as a lack of sincerity. What cooperation? Let's keep fighting. This emperor would like to see how many of you can walk out of this emperor's territory alive. The immortal God Emperor looked especially mighty, domineering, and confident. Though he wasn't necessarily Taiyu God Emperor's match, he could summon an army of thousands and mount a never-ending siege on the Taiyu Shrine's powerhouses. As long as he set his mind to it, he could wipe out the Taiyu Shrine's powerhouses no matter the price he had to pay. Even if there were some who managed to escape in the end, there would only be a handful of them. The Taiyu God Emperor was sure to be one of them. The 4 temple lords had all reached the upper God Emperor realm. 3 of them had condensed 7 Taoist rhymes, while the Taiyu God Emperor had condensed 8. In terms of strength, no one dared boast that they could kill or capture the Taiyu God Emperor. However, the immortal God Emperor was willing to sacrifice tens of thousands of elite God Kings to kill the Taiyu Shrine's temple lords. There was a good chance he could achieve this. The Taiyu God Emperor understood this as well, so he naturally wouldn't take the immortal God Emperor's words lightly. He frowned fiercely and glared at the immortal God Emperor. He scolded, "Immortal, you're doing this knowingly. You're ignoring this Emperor. If you really want to fight, don't blame me for being merciless and turning your territory upside down." He guessed that when the immortal God Emperor went all out, he would gather countless elite God Kings to besiege them. Even if he had to pay a high price, he would still annihilate the Hall Masters. However, he was confident that he could bring the Temple Masters out of danger and leave the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. In the worst-case scenario, all the elite God Kings accompanying them would die in battle. It seemed that both sides were ready for a showdown, and a great battle was about to start. The immortal God Emperor frowned and suppressed his anger for the time being. He said solemnly, "I'll give you one last chance, old man Taiyu. You spent so much effort searching for Kenshin. Is it to kill him for revenge, or to take him under your wing?" This time, his tone was sharper and heavier than before. Taiyu God Emperor knew that the immortal God Emperor's patience was running out. This was definitely his last chance. If he answered truthfully, there would still be a chance for negotiation. If he continued to be perfunctory, there would be nothing left to talk about. They would have to shed all pretense of cordiality and start a war. After a moment of hesitation, Taiyu God Emperor said, "Immortal, you and I both know the answer. Kenshin is no ordinary God Emperor. Given his strength and cultivation, he has so many tricks and schemes. His talent and aptitude are rare in the world. Not to mention the 20-odd hall masters of the 4 sacred halls, even I am ashamed of my inferiority. Therefore, you should understand what I mean." Since Taiyu God Emperor had backed down, the immortal God Emperor didn't press the issue. 30,000 years ago, you mentioned the phrase, "the Chosen One." You said yourself that only the Chosen One can ignite the eternal flame and open the door to the heavenly Tao, unlocking the mysteries of immortality. In that case, you already have enough confidence to confirm that the Sword God is the one chosen by the heavens? Is that why you're going through so much trouble to take him under your wing? Taiyu God Emperor didn't answer directly. You're asking a question you already know the answer to. In fact, isn't that why you're searching for him at all costs? At this point, both sides were basically admitting to it. The immortal God Emperor nodded. Good, as long as you admit it. Since we both want to capture Kenshin and use him to open the door to the heavenly Tao, I'll ask you one question. If we capture Kenshin, how should we split the spoils? Taiyu God Emperor wanted to say that whoever captured Kenshin had the right to deal with him. But on second thought, the immortal God Emperor had a better chance of capturing Kenshin in the Pantheon of Immortality's territory. At that time, if Kenshin was really captured by the immortal God Emperor, would he just stand by and watch? Taiyu God Emperor didn't dare guarantee that, nor did he believe he could hold back. Thus, he chose a compromise. We'll work together. No matter who captures Kenshin, we'll discuss how to deal with Kenshin together. Even if we have to go to the Chaos Sea and open the door to the heavenly Tao, we'll go together. Taiyu God Emperor spoke with a solemn expression. The immortal God Emperor waved his hand and sneered disdainfully. That's easy for you to say, old man Taiyu. If you capture Kenshin first, will you tell this emperor? Don't tell me you will, I won't believe it. This. Taiyu God Emperor was at a loss for words, unable to answer this question. Of course, if he captured Kenshin, he wouldn't tell the immortal God Emperor either. He'd definitely take Kenshin away in secret. Then, he'd find a suitable time to take Kenshin to the Chaos Sea and try to open the door to the heavenly Tao. However, he couldn't fool the immortal God Emperor. Even if he said he would do it, the God Emperor wouldn't believe him. Kuei Yunxian Pavilion. There was no foundation of trust between the two, which made it difficult for them to reach a consensus. Taiyu God Emperor pondered for a moment with a frown. Immortal, since you and I don't trust each other, I'd like to hear your opinion. The immortal God Emperor smirked. It's simple, whoever captures Kenshin first has the right to deal with him. Before that, we just need to stop fighting and killing each other. This was undoubtedly the most beneficial decision for the immortal God Emperor. This was his territory, and there were soldiers under his command everywhere. He had at least a 70% chance of capturing Kenshin while Taiyu God Emperor only had a 30% chance. Both God Emperor and the immortal God Emperor were well aware of this. Moreover, the immortal God Emperor was full of confidence and wasn't afraid that Taiyu God Emperor wouldn't agree. As expected. Taiyu God Emperor furrowed his brows, feeling indignant but unable to resolve the issue. After a moment of silence, he nodded. Fine. Immortal, this emperor agrees to your conditions. I hope you'll remember our agreement. As for who can capture Kenshin, that'll depend on their own abilities. A victorious smile appeared on the immortal God Emperor's face as he nodded his head in agreement. Of course, let's be frank. This emperor and my soldiers can pretend we didn't see you. However, we've already set up traps, ambushes, and defensive lines, so please don't approach. If you want to capture Kenshin, you'll have to rely on your own abilities. Don't even think about borrowing this emperor's strength. Chapter 4780. The immortal God Emperor's words sounded reasonable. If he didn't oppose the Taiyu God Emperor, the two sides would have reached an agreement. If the Taiyu God Emperor wanted to capture Kenshin, he would have to rely on his own power and influence. How could he borrow the power of the Pantheon of Immortality? Even if the Taiyu God Emperor sent someone to observe the situation and wait for the Pantheon of Immortality to discover Kenshin, he still wouldn't allow it. This request left the Taiyu God Emperor extremely conflicted and furious. He had no choice. If he didn't agree, the Pantheon of Immortality would do everything in his power to send out groups of experts to surround them. But if he agreed, he wouldn't be able to set foot on the northern border for tens of millions of kilometers. This was equivalent to handing over the initiative to the Pantheon of Immortality. Perhaps he could refuse, but he wouldn't be able to continue negotiating with the immortal God Emperor. Negotiations between the two sides broke down. Who told him to be the one to negotiate first? It was only natural that he would be at a disadvantage. The two sides reached an agreement, but they parted on bad terms. The Taiyu God Emperor left with his fleet in a huff. After returning to the starship, his face was filled with anger as he clenched his fists and cursed fiercely, "Boom, yeah, you dog, you actually dare to bully this emperor? Once I capture Kenshin, I'll teach him a lesson." The second and third hallmasters were also furious. They wanted nothing more than to tear the immortal God Emperor to pieces. In their eyes, the first hallmaster was the leader of the four sacred halls and should be respected and revered by everyone. But now, he'd suffered such a great loss in front of the immortal God Emperor. It was truly abominable. The second hallmaster frowned in thought. He couldn't help but whisper, "First hallmaster, do you think the immortal emperor will keep his word? Do we really have to leave their defenses?" He wouldn't be satisfied if they really had to keep their word. He felt that this matter could be manipulated a little. But Emperor Taiyu waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Immortal may be despicable, but he's not an idiot. The fact that he's tolerated our invasion to this extent is already a sign of his rationality and self-restraint. If we go back on our word, he'll lose his rationality even if it's for the sake of face. He'll gather a large force to annihilate us. Otherwise, where's his prestige and dignity?" The second and third hallmasters were speechless, not knowing what to say. Indeed, if they were the immortal God Emperors, they would also recklessly start a war for the dignity and prestige of the hallmaster. Not for anything else, but to let the people see and believe that the temple had the ability and determination to protect everyone. After a moment of silence, the third palace master was still unwilling to give up. He asked, are we going to leave just like that? Search aimlessly. The Taiyu God Emperor shook his head again. It's not that aimless. Don't underestimate the Kenshin. The immortal God Emperor has set up a perimeter of tens of millions of miles. It'll be the hardest to catch the Kenshin. In comparison, it'll be easier for us to find traces and clues if we search the safer areas. The second and third hallmasters thought about it carefully and felt that this was indeed the case. Next, they split into two teams and began to search and explore several branches in the border area. For safety's sake, the second and third hallmasters formed a team while the Taiyu God Emperor moved alone. The injured fourth, fifth, and sixth hallmasters stayed in the Taiyu God Emperor's worship. They kept their search area within the Pantheon of Immortality's perimeter. They basically didn't run into the Pantheon of Immortality. In addition, their warships hid their auras and tracks. Ji Tianqing headed straight for the northern border of the Pantheon of Immortality. It only took him 2 days to cross a hall and arrive near the border. Another 1,000,000 miles to the north, and they would pass through this branch, leave the territory of the Immortal Temple, and enter the unknown. He had already discovered the Pantheon of Immortality and the movements of many elite god kings in this region. In truth, the perimeter that the immortal God Emperor had painstakingly set up stretched for 15 million miles, but it was to the left of Ji Tianqing's front. The northern border was very long, and that perimeter was right in the middle. Ji Tianqing was to the northeast. The God Emperor experts in charge of this perimeter were the third and fifth hallmasters of the Pantheon of Immortality. The two hallmasters had long since gathered 12 hallmasters and more than 10,000 elite god kings under their command. A portion of them were defending the border, maintaining numerous traps and arrays. The other half were patrolling and searching for clues. The god-slaying worship concealed its aura and tracks, and it also slowed down. It leisurely traversed mountains and rivers, heading north. In 4 hours, Ji Tianqing encountered 4 groups of people. They were all hallmasters of the various halls. They were leading hundreds, if not thousands, of elite god kings as they searched the area. Ji Tianqing ignored these people. The god-slaying worship brushed past these 4 groups without being discovered. His goal was not to eliminate ordinary god kings, but to find the hallmasters of the Pantheon of Immortality and the hallmasters of the Taiyu Shrine. He wanted to see if the hallmasters of the 2 great halls had encountered each other and if they had engaged in a battle that would give him an opportunity to take advantage of. Therefore, the god-slaying worship was not in a hurry to leave the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. It also cruised within the borders. 8 hours later, the god-slaying worship had traveled 1,000,000 miles in the northwest direction. Ji Tianqing finally encountered the first God Emperor expert, the 5th Hallmaster of the Pantheon of Immortality. The 5th Hallmaster oversaw the border. He stayed in his worship and commanded many Hallmasters and thousands of elite god kings. His worship also cruised continuously, and the soldiers under his command remained vigilant. Not far behind the worship was the perimeter where the experts had gathered. Arrays were set up in various mountain ranges, and there were also various traps and ambushes. Ji Tianqing secretly followed the 5th Hallmaster and observed him for a while before leaving quietly. Based on the current situation, he could basically guess that the Pantheon of Immortality had put in all his effort to set up the perimeter and capture him at all costs. However, the 5th Hallmaster's behavior made it difficult for him to confirm whether the Pantheon of Immortality and the people of the Taiyu Shrine had engaged in a battle or not. Ji Tianqing continued to rush towards the northwest, wanting to find out more about the situation. After a few more hours, he made further progress. Other than meeting a few Hallmasters and elite god kings, he also met a God Emperor expert. It was the 3rd Hallmaster of the Pantheon of Immortality. The 3rd Hallmaster's situation was similar to the 5th Hallmaster's. He also sat in the worship and silently patrolled the border while commanding many Hallmasters and elite god kings. As his strength was similar to the 3rd Hallmaster's, Ji Tianqing could not be too obvious or too close to the 3rd Hallmaster. He could not eavesdrop on the third Hullmaster's orders. He could only observe the other party's direction and the movements of the soldiers to determine the specific situation. Chapter 4781. The Pantheon of Immortality has mobilized at least tens of thousands of god kings to create such a scene at the border. They're really sparing no expense. With such a huge commotion, it's impossible for the Taiyu Shrine to miss it if they rush over. However, the two Pantheon of Immortality are still so relaxed and calm. Could it be that they haven't met or fought? In the cockpit of the god-slaying battleship, Ji Tianqing frowned and analyzed the situation. White Dragon focused on steering the battleship and cautiously observed the surroundings. Hearing his master's muttering, he thought for a moment and asked, "Master, could it be that the Taiyu Shrine's people have come, but after seeing the Pantheon of Immortality, they hid and didn't show up?" Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and shook his head. With my understanding of the Taiyu God Emperor, he wouldn't do that. He would definitely use the power of the Pantheon of Immortality to hide and observe the situation. Once the Pantheon of Immortality discovers our tracks, the Taiyu God Emperor will jump out to intercept us. However, the Pantheon of Immortality isn't stupid. If the Taiyu Shrine's people hide nearby, they will definitely discover them and clash. White Dragon frowned and said with a troubled expression, "Master, we're now in a three-way game with the Taiyu Shrine in the Pantheon of Immortality. You, the Taiyu God Emperor, and the Pantheon of Immortality are all experts with great foresight. Your deduction and calculation is really a bit troublesome. What do you think we should do next? Should we directly leave the Pantheon of Immortality's territory and head to the Chaos Sea? Or should we continue to search the border and find a chance to start a war between the two shrines?" Ji Tianqing was silent. He pondered and analyzed for a while before dispelling the fog and deducing the truth. In the past month or so, the Taiyu Shrine and the Pantheon of Immortality must have come into contact with each other. Later, when I kill a team and capture a Hull Master for interrogation, I will be able to verify this point. Since the experts of the two temples had come into contact, and yet nothing had happened, it could only mean that they had reached a consensus. They even wanted to capture me, so they reached some kind of agreement or cooperation. At this point, Ji Tianqing already had an answer in his heart. If the experts of the two temples were to kill each other, he would still have a chance to stir up trouble and take advantage of the situation. But now that the experts of the two temples had reached an agreement, there was no longer any chance for him to succeed. If he showed up rashly, he would be besieged by the powerhouses of the two temples, and his ending would be miserable. Bai Long listened to his master's analysis and showed a hint of surprise. He couldn't help but ask, "Master, it can't be. Didn't the Taiyu Shrine and the Pantheon of Immortality hold grudges against each other for a long time? How could they reach an agreement and cooperate?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "You don't understand the nature of the Taiyu God Emperor and the Immortal God Emperor. For overlords like them, as long as it's not a matter of life and death, there's no real grudge between them. As long as they have a common goal and benefit, they can negotiate and negotiate. Alright, let's not go forward anymore. Turn east and go around their defense line." Bai Long thought about it and agreed. After all, he had followed his master for so many years and had seen many similar things. He didn't say anything else and hurriedly controlled the God-Slayer battleship to turn east. 12 hours later, the God-Slayer battleship reached the easternmost part of the defense line. If they went any further, they would be far away from the Pantheon of Immortality's defense line. At this time, the God-Slayer battleship encountered the last group of people. It was still a Hull Master leading a few hundred elite God Kings in a battleship. Ji Tianqing gave the order, and Bai Long decisively opened fire and launched an attack. Boom, 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 boom. When the invisible God-Slayer battleship was 20,000 miles away from the battleship, it suddenly shot out more than 300 beams of divine power. Dazzling divine light filled the sky and loud explosions shook the heavens. The 300 beams of light poured down like a rain of arrows and immediately engulfed the battleship. It was a top-grade King-level battleship that had been cruising in the vicinity for a month and had been safe and sound. The people controlling the battleship, the Hall Master, and the elite God Kings in the battleship weren't prepared for a sudden attack at all. When they saw the incoming beams of divine power, they were filled with fear and shock. It was too late for them to dodge even if they wanted to. With a series of loud bangs, the defensive light shield of the battleship was shattered into pieces, bursting into countless fragments of divine light. Dozens of craters appeared on the battleship's surface as well as a few wide cracks. More than a dozen unlucky elite God Kings were struck by the beams of divine power that pierced through the battleship and died on the spot. The sudden attack caused the Hall Master and the elite God Kings to turn pale with fright. They didn't hesitate to control the battleship and flee into the distance. The Godslayer battleship was already prepared. It sped up and chased after them. It activated its divine cannon again and released more than 300 beams of light. Another loud rumbling sound erupted. The already damaged battleship was broken into 3 sections on the spot, scattering countless fragments and metal pieces. More than 100 unlucky elite God Kings were killed on the spot by the Godslayer battleship. The remaining 600 or so elite God Kings also fled the wreckage of the battleship pathetically and assembled in the sky. At this moment, Ji Tianqing stepped out of the Godslayer battleship. He held the sword of burial of heaven and attacked personally. The moment they saw him appear, the Hall Master and the hundreds of elite God Kings were filled with fear and despair. They never expected that the Pantheon of Immortality would go all out to capture Kenshin. Dozens of Hall Masters and tens of thousands of elite God Kings didn't encounter Kenshin, but they did. Originally, this was their lucky day and also their chance to perform meritorious deeds. However, they were no match for Kenshin and would definitely be slaughtered. Therefore, no one could feel happy. Instead, they were filled with despair. They watched as Kenshin sped over and brandished his divine sword, creating a sky full of sword gleams. Knowing that they were going to die, the Hall Master decisively made the wisest choice. That was to get the soldiers to scatter and escape in all directions. He wanted as many survivors as possible. At the same time, he took out his communication jade slip and reported the situation to the Hall Masters. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was, he and the soldiers could die here, but he had to spread the news. Swish. 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 The Hall Master had just sent out his communication jade slip when the sky full of sword gleams slashed down and enveloped everyone. Boom. 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 A series of muffled sounds erupted, reverberating between heaven and earth. One by one, the elite God Kings were sliced into pieces by the resplendent golden sword gleams. Blood and flesh splattered all over the sky. Mournful howls and roars of pain reverberated between heaven and earth. After the sky full of sword gleams dissipated, only about 400 of the elite God Kings were left of the original 600 or so. Ji Tianqing struck out with the Dragon Elephant Divine Fist again, creating a sky full of sword gleams as he continued to pursue and kill everyone. The elite God Kings who were lucky enough to survive panicked and fled in all directions. In the end, only about 20 God Kings managed to escape. The Hall Master was captured by Ji Tianqing, and the rest were killed. Chapter 4782. The White Dragon steered the god-slaying warship around the Pantheon of Immortality's defensive line and continued to fly north. Ji Tianqing captured the Hall Master and entered the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower to interrogate him. He gave the Hall Master a chance to confess, but the Hall Master was stubborn and would rather die than submit. He even threatened that the Pantheon of Immortality would not let him go. Ji Tianqing did not waste any time. He killed the Hall Master and refined his divinity in the distorted spacetime, robbing him of his memories. Compared to extorting a confession by torture, this would waste more time, but it was also the most violent and efficient method. Ji Tianqing spent 5 days in the distorted spacetime to refine the Hall Master's divinity and obtain his memories. Even though this Hall Master had never participated in any major battles and had never seen the immortal God Emperor with his own eyes since joining this operation, he had never personally seen him. However, he knew some insider information and the operation plan of the Hall Masters. Just as Ji Tianqing had guessed, not long ago, the Taiyu Shrine and the Pantheon of Immortality had a major battle. However, the battle did not cause too many casualties. Neither side lost a Hall Master, only more than 1,000 elite God Kings died. Later on, for some reason, the two sides stopped fighting. After that, the Lord Hall Master ordered all the Hall Masters who participated in the operation to guard the northern border and not relax. At the same time, they only needed to search for Kenshin and were not to make things difficult for the Taiyu Shrine's people. Of course, if the Taiyu Shrine's people approached the defensive line or wandered around nearby, they would not be polite. As a Hall Master, this person did not know why the Lord Hall Master made this decision and what kind of communication between the two great halls. However, when Ji Tianqing received the news, he showed an expression of, "I knew it," and sneered in his heart. He knew the Taiyu God Emperor and the immortal God Emperor very well and guessed that the two God Emperors would stop fighting, communicate, and negotiate before finally coming to an agreement. Since that was the case, leaving the Pantheon of Immortality's territory as soon as possible and not showing up was the right choice. After leaving the distorted spacetime, Ji Tianqing returned to the cockpit of the god-slaying warship and ordered the White Dragon, full speed ahead and enter the unknown land as soon as possible. The White Dragon did not ask for the reason and only followed the order. In his heart, he knew very well that his master must have verified his conjecture, which was why he was so certain. Moreover, his master had just killed a group of elite god kings. The lords of Pantheon of Immortality must have received the news and were rushing over with all their might. At this time, they had to escape and enter the unknown land as soon as possible. Warship's Immortality's territory. An Immortality's territory. Of Immortality. The mountains here were steeper, the forests were deeper, and the sky was filled with fog. There were harsh environments and traps everywhere. Without a doubt, this was a mysterious place that even the Immortal Temple had not been able to conquer. After entering the unknown land, the god-slaying warship did not let down its guard. It remained cautious, concealing its tracks and aura. The development of the situation was in line with Ji Tianqing's expectations. Before that Hall Lord died, he sent a jade slip to the second Hall Lord. Soon, the other Hall Lords received the news. The Hall Masters were currently commanding the various elite God Kings to search the defensive line in full swing. The sudden news excited the Hall Lords. Without a word, they led their soldiers to the scene of the incident. The immortal God Emperor was able to remain calm even though he was excited. He frowned in thought and seriously analyzed the situation. "I thought that if that guy went north, he would have to pass through our defensive line. I didn't expect him to circle around to the northeast. Since that's the case, he wouldn't have stayed after killing those soldiers. He would have headed north in a straight line and fled into the unknown land as quickly as possible. Since that's the case, there's no point in us rushing to the scene of the incident. He's long gone. Only a fool would wait for us to surround him." It was a very simple logic. The immortal God Emperor immediately ordered the Hall Lords to head northeast and enter the unknown land as quickly as possible to search for traces and clues left behind by Kenshin. The moment anyone found a definite clue, they were to immediately inform him and the Hall Lords. This way, he could accurately grasp Kenshin's movements and determine Kenshin's intentions. After receiving the order, the Hall Lords changed directions and carried out their orders. As a result, the Pantheon of Immortality once again turned out in full force. The 5 Hall Masters led close to 6,000 elite God Kings towards the north as fast as lightning. In addition, the hall lords of the various halls also received orders to quickly assemble at the northern border. Although they had many people, without a god emperor leading them, they were relatively weak. The immortal god emperor ordered them to assemble. Every 5 hall lords would form an elite army of 5,000 and enter the unknown land together. This way, each army would have a considerable fighting strength. Even if they encountered a god emperor, they would be able to put up a fight. The immortal god emperor, the 2nd hall lord, and the 3rd hall lord had been roaming around the border, searching for Ji Tianqing's whereabouts. The immortal god emperor had forbidden them from approaching the defense line. But how could the immortal god emperor obediently obey? He still had a backup plan. He had arranged for a group of elite scouts to roam around the defense line and gather information. In less than half an hour after the incident, the scouts sensed the unusual movements of the indestructible shrine. Seeing that the hall lords of the various halls were leading large groups of elite god kings away from the defense line and toward the north, the scouts hurriedly reported the news to the immortal god emperor. The immortal god emperor had been paying attention to the immortal god emperor's movements this entire time. Upon receiving this news, he immediately ordered his soldiers to head north. He was well aware that the immortal god emperor had been lying in wait all this time. Now that he had suddenly turned out in full force and was heading north, it had to be to hunt down Kenshin. In other words, Kenshin had already appeared and clashed with the Pantheon of Immortality. The immortal god emperor must have known about Kenshin's whereabouts to give this order. Thus, the immortal god emperor, the 2nd hall lord, and the 3rd hall lord took their warships and headed north as quickly as possible. Several months ago, the experts of the 2 halls of immortality had joined forces to hunt down Kenshin. Things had calmed down for several months, but now, the same thing was happening once more. The immortal god emperor planned to maintain his cooperation with the immortal god emperor for the time being. At the very least, he wouldn't have a falling out on the surface. But in reality, once both sides entered the unknown lands, they would have to act according to the situation. The immortal god emperor was treacherous. He had clearly discovered Kenshin's whereabouts, but he wasn't willing to tell him. If he had the chance in the future, he would definitely take revenge on the immortal god emperor when he was in the unknown lands. Chapter 4783. Ji Tianqing did not know much about the unknown land north of the Pantheon of Immortality. He had only seen a map not long ago and knew the approximate size of this region. However, he did not know what mysteries lay in this unknown land and which god emperor powerhouses occupied it. However, based on his past experience of traveling through the unknown land, there were at most 2 or 3 god emperor beast overlords in this region. Ji Tianqing did not have much to worry about when entering the unknown land. The only ones he was wary of were the powerhouses of the Taiyu Shrine and the Pantheon of Immortality. He needed to calculate how long it would take for the powerhouses of the 2 shrines to catch up to him. At the same time, he had to ensure that no accidents would occur after entering the unknown land and that he would not waste too much time. The 2 divine halls and him, the 3 forces, were not mediocre. They all had enough wisdom and means. But in the end, it would still require some luck and opportunity to reap the benefits. However, it was obvious that the heavens would not always favor Ji Tianqing. He could not always be lucky. After entering the unknown land, the god-slaying battleship had only flown for half a day when something unexpected happened. Beast tribe powerhouses had set up an ambush along the god-slaying battleship's path. When the god-slaying battleship passed by a majestic mountain range and flew over a lush forest, something unexpected happened. Swish! 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 A dazzling light lit up in the forest. Divine light that blotted out the sky suddenly appeared and formed several huge light shields, forming a terrifying array formation. 3 layers of divine light shields with a radius of 10,000 miles enveloped the god-slaying battleship. They released a terrifying suppressive force that suppressed the god-slaying battleship. As a result, the god-slaying battleship's flying speed was reduced by 30%. Its altitude also dropped by a few hundred feet. Immediately after, thousands of beast tribe powerhouses flew out from the forest in all directions. In the blink of an eye, they formed a circle and surrounded the god-slaying battleship. A giant beast as large as a mountain flew out from the dense forest. It stood high in the sky and looked down at the god-slaying battleship from above. "Who are you? How dare you invade my territory? Are you courting death?" The celestial arch-god beast, which was covered in golden fur and looked like a lion, opened its bloody mouth and roared loudly. Within the god-slaying battleship, Ji Tianqing frowned as he looked at the divine beast lord in the sky. He muttered to himself, "How could this be? Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? We just entered the unknown lands not long ago. How did we encounter a beast overlord?" In his mind, this unknown land was so vast that even if there were 3 to 5 overlords, they should have occupied a large territory. The god-slaying battleship would need to travel for at least 2 days before it would pass by the lair of a certain beast overlord. This beast overlord had appeared far too early and had even set up traps and ambushes. This was far too abnormal. Thus, Ji Tianqing decided to test the waters. He flew out of the god-slaying battleship and into the sky. He faced off against the lion-like beast overlord and said in a low voice, "How should I address you? I am just passing by and have no ill intentions. I wonder why you have set up an ambush here and attacked my battleship." It would be best if he could avoid conflict with the other party. At the very least, he wouldn't be wasting time. As for asking about the other party's identity, he just wanted to understand the other party's intentions. The God Emperor Realm Godly Beast was clearly not a scheming person. When it heard Ji Tianqing's words, it laughed heartily. "Ha ha ha, foreign race brat, are you playing dumb with me? Do you think I will let you go just because you are so polite to me? You are too naive." The Pantheon of Immortality came out in full force and caused such a huge commotion in my territory. Do you think I am blind and don't exist? If I am not wrong, the Pantheon of Immortality spent so much effort and resources just to capture you. If you had settled this matter in the Pantheon of Immortality's territory, that would have been fine. But of all things, you shouldn't have barged into this emperor's territory. Do you want to bring the flames of war here and kill the people under this emperor's command? Don't even think about it. I will kill you today to prevent future troubles. The words of the Orc Overlord revealed its true thoughts, as well as what it had done before. Ji Tianqing understood immediately. The Pantheon of Immortality had caused such a huge commotion that the Beast Overlord had been paying attention to it and was prepared. Perhaps this Beast Overlord didn't know what had happened and what had caused it. However, this Beast Overlord had set up traps and ambushes in advance and was unwilling to stay out of the matter. It wanted to interfere. Ji Tianqing said that he was just passing by and had no intention of disturbing the other party. However, the other party still refused to give up. Since that was the case, there was nothing left to talk about. They could only fight to the death to decide the victor. Ji Tianqing frowned and stared at the Beast Overlord. He asked in a low voice, "Are you sure you want to interfere and add to the casualties? There is no enmity between us, and these Beast Overlord soldiers are innocent. If you really want to fight with me, these experts will all die in a few rounds. Have you considered this? Furthermore, even if we fight to the end, you may not be able to defeat me. I hope you will think twice before you act. Don't make a mistake." As he spoke, Ji Tianqing released a divine aura that could suppress everything. The aura of a god emperor immediately spread out. Under the cover of this invisible divine aura, the elite Beast Overlord soldiers were filled with fear and worry. Even the Beast Overlord was wary of Ji Tianqing's aura and hesitated. Although Ji Tianqing's words were a threat, they were also the truth. If the Beast Overlord insisted on attacking him, not only would it not gain any benefits, it would also suffer heavy casualties. Originally, the beast overlord had thought of backing off and forcing Ji Tianqing to swear an oath. As long as he did not harass its people, it would allow him to pass through. However, the beast overlord had second thoughts. It had long known about this and had spent so much time and effort to set up this trap. Now that it had finally intercepted the other party, what would happen if the other party dismissed it with just a few words? Where would its dignity as a beast overlord be? Its strength and dignity as a god emperor would no longer exist. Thus, after a moment of silence, the beast overlord shouted in a low voice, "Kid, I already knew that you foreign races have always been good at sweet-talking and bluffing. No matter what you say today, I will not let you leave. We will only know if this matter succeeds after we fight." After speaking, the beast overlord ordered the elite beast overlords. It roared in a dignified tone, "Attack. Beat them up for this emperor. Let these bastards know how powerful you are. Since they dared to barge into my territory, they can forget about leaving unscathed." As its voice fell, more than 2,000 beast overlords roared in anger and released earth-shattering divine abilities and spells. They surrounded the god-slaying battleship. Chapter 4784. Ji Tianqing wasn't afraid of the beast race lord in the first place. He just didn't want to waste time in a pointless fight and give the experts of the Pantheon of Immortality a chance to catch up. However, the beast race lord was very confident. He didn't listen to advice and was a little overbearing. Since the two sides didn't have a chance to negotiate and the other side attacked first, Ji Tianqing wasn't going to show mercy. "You're courting death." Ji Tianqing roared angrily. Golden divine light burst out of his body and his aura reached its peak. He unleashed all of his power and swung the sword of burial of heaven. He slashed out hundreds of dazzling sword lights toward the crowd. Bang bang bang. Countless divine spells and sword shadows were shattered by the sword light that was thousands of feet long. Muffled noises could be heard. Most of the sword lights landed in the crowd and immediately cut the Divine King elite beasts into pieces. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Painful screams and shrill cries rang out, reverberating endlessly between the heavens and the earth. In just one exchange, over 100 God King realm beasts were killed by Ji Tianqing. As for their attacks, they were blocked by the divine light barrier after hitting the god-slaying battleship. The five-colored light barrier shook violently from the impact. Layers of ripples appeared on its surface, but it did not shatter. Bai Long controlled the god-slaying battleship and activated its divine cannons. 360 divine light beams were fired at the beast race experts on both sides. With a series of loud rumbling sounds, the more than 300 pillars of divine power exploded in the crowd, filling the sky with divine light and bits of flesh and blood. Over 100 unlucky god kings of the beast race were blasted into pieces by the god-slaying battleship. Not even their bones were left. There were dozens of beasts who were lucky enough to survive, but they were severely injured. Their divine bodies were incomplete, and they looked especially miserable. The beast race lord saw that the other side was so strong. He immediately frowned and a cold light flashed through his eyes. "Damn bastard! You are courting death." The beast lord roared and waved his claws and fangs, unleashing a violent aura as he charged towards Ji Tianqing without regard for anything else. It had to make a move personally to stop Ji Tianqing. Otherwise, the several thousand divine king realm beasts under its command would not have been enough for Ji Tianqing and the god-slaying battleship. After the orc lord joined the battle, the situation changed. After all, it had the strength of a mid-level god emperor, so Ji Tianqing could only divert most of his attention to deal with it. For the time being, he had no time to slaughter the beast race god kings. As the two god emperors fought in the sky, they could only occasionally release a bit of their divine power. The shockwaves from their battle could easily harm dozens of beasts. White Dragon controlled the god-slaying battleship. Not only did he have to defend against the attacks of the many beasts, but he also had to fire the cannons to counterattack. Gradually, he began to feel powerless. In theory, even if the god-slaying battleship was an emperor-level divine warship, it would not be able to withstand the combined attacks of several thousand god-kings. Even if the god-slaying battleship counterattacked with all its might and could kill several hundred god-kings, it was destined to be destroyed. White Dragon also understood this point. So while he was counterattacking with all his might, he did not forget to find an opportunity to break out of the encirclement. Furthermore, the hatch of the god-slaying battleship opened. 3 beams of divine light flashed and flew out of the battleship. Swoosh! 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 The 3 figures that appeared in the sky were 3 peerless beauties. They each had their own merits, but they were all top-notch beauties in the world. Moreover, they were all god-emperors. They were the Pan-Ruo god-emperor, Yunyao, and Ji Ku. They all held divine weapons and were enveloped in divine light shields. Their killing intent soared to the sky. Without any nonsense, they directly joined the battle. They waved their divine weapons and began to slaughter the beast race god kings. Swish! 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 The Pan-Ruo god emperor waved her divine sword and instantly shot out hundreds of sword lights. They rained down like a rain of arrows and landed on the crowd in the west. Ji Ku flew high into the sky and waved her divine spear. Nirvana flames covered the sky and covered the sun. Like a torrential flood, they rained down on the crowd in the east. Yunyao waved her 2 swords and slashed out hundreds of crescent-shaped sword lights. They charged into the crowd in the north. Instantly, more than 3,000 beast race god kings were swallowed by the sword lights. In the raging sea of flames, they let out heart-wrenching screams and wails. Among the 3 beauties, the Pan-Ruo god emperor was the strongest. Her killing power was also the most terrifying. She only used 1 move to kill more than 100 beast race god kings. As for Yunyao and Ji Ku, although they were only at the god emperor initial stage and had only condensed 1 Dao rhyme, it was more than enough to deal with these beast race god kings. The 2 of them used their mystic arts and secret techniques. In the blink of an eye, they killed dozens of beast race god kings and injured dozens more. The power of the 3,000 beast race god kings was divided. They had to surround the god-slaying battleship and deal with Yunyao and Pan-Ruo. The pressure on the god-slaying battleship was greatly reduced. Bai Long was also able to divert more energy to continue firing the cannons to kill the beast race. Following a series of loud rumbling noises, the 2 sides launched a fierce battle. In just 100 breaths of time, the 2 sides exchanged dozens of blows. The battle was one-sided. Almost half of the 3,000 beast race god kings were killed. There were still 1,800 left. They were still fighting a bloody battle and refused to retreat. The god-slaying battleship was unscathed. It was still protected by the divine light barrier. Bai Long was still controlling the god-slaying battleship to attack. Pan-Ruo, Yunyao, and Pan-Ruo were also unscathed. Their divine power was still abundant. They continuously unleashed destructive mystic arts and mystic arts. The mountains and rivers within a radius of 20,000 miles were swept away by the divine power shockwaves. Countless forests and mountains were destroyed. They were turned into ruins. Many deep pits and wide ravines were left on the ground. Dust filled the air, and fragments of divine light sprinkled down. The 1,000 beast race god kings were terrified. Their hearts were filled with fear. They all had the thought of running away. As for Ji Tianqing and the beast race leader, who were fighting high up in the sky, the victor had already been decided. Both of them were in the middle stage of the God Emperor stage. They had condensed 5 Daoist rhymes. Logically speaking, they should be evenly matched. However, that was not the case. From the beginning, the beast race leader was suppressed by Ji Tianqing. After exchanging 2 blows, it was forced to retreat. After exchanging 3 blows, it was injured. Now, the two sides had already exchanged more than 60 blows. The battlefield had shifted close to 50,000 miles. Countless ravines and ruins were left behind along the way. Ji Tianqing was unscathed. He was calm and composed. There was not a single wound on his body. The mountain-sized beast overlord was covered in hideous wounds. Blood kept flowing out of the wounds, making it look like a bloody mess. One of its legs had been severed. There was also a huge wound on its back. One could clearly see the divine bones inside. Furthermore, its right eye had been pierced through by the sword of burial of heaven. Only a hole was left. After suffering such heavy injuries, the beast race leader's strength fell drastically. It was extremely terrified. It could only turn around and run. However, how could Ji Tianqing let it go so easily? He naturally pursued it. Chapter 4785. The beast tribe leader fled with all its might into the depths of the unknown lands. While fleeing, it did not forget to contact the other beast tribe leaders and ask for their help. Back then, it had discovered that there were strange movements in the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality, so it had secretly sent its elite beast tribe members to investigate the situation. After its investigation, it did not inform the other beast tribe leaders and set up traps and ambushes on its own. No matter what benefits there were, it could take them all for itself. However, it now regretted not informing the other beast tribe leaders. If it had cooperated with the other beast tribe leaders, wouldn't it have been a piece of cake to deal with Ji Tianqing? Heavenly Dragon Slash. Sword piercing the 9 heavens. Ji Tianqing pursued the beast tribe leader relentlessly. Every time the distance between them closed to over 10,000 kilometers, he would use a divine ability. The beast tribe leader was in great pain. Its injuries were worsening, and its strength was weakening. Its speed became slower and slower, and it could no longer shake Ji Tianqing off its tail. 15 minutes later, it was stopped by Ji Tianqing. In the air above a majestic mountain range, the two of them engaged in an intense battle. Although the battle was intense, the two of them were not evenly matched. Instead, it was a one-sided battle. Ji Tianqing only used 3 moves to destroy the Orc Overlord's divine body, smashing it into pieces and turning it into a pile of flesh and blood. The beast tribe leader only had 1 divinity left. It was also injured, and its surface was full of cracks. Even so, it did not give up on escaping. Its divinity released a dazzling divine flame as it fled into the distance. As long as it could escape, it did not care if it had to use a divine ability or consume its own strength and lifespan. Ji Tianqing hurriedly used teleportation to chase after it. In just a few breaths' time, he had stopped it again. He then swung the sword of burial of heaven and slashed out a few heaven-splitting sword projections, which struck the beast tribe leader's divinity. Following a crisp cracking sound, the beast tribe leader's divinity was shattered on the spot, turning into over 20 divinity fragments. Just like that, the beast overlord lost its life. Before it died, it was filled with regret and unwillingness. He hated himself for meddling in other people's business. He should not have investigated the Pantheon of Immortality. It hated itself for being greedy and selfish. After discovering the situation, it did not cooperate with the lords and chose to act alone. If that wasn't the case, how could it have ended up like this? However, all these regrets and unwillingness were meaningless. You only have 1 life. If you lose it, you can't get it back. The muffled sound that reverberated between heaven and earth gradually dissipated, and the divine light that filled the sky also gradually disappeared. The battle was over. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and caught the quintessence fragments that were falling from the sky. He put them into his spatial ring. This beast overlord had neither an emperor-level divine weapon nor a battleship. Apart from the godhead fragment, it could be said that he had nothing else on him. Therefore, after the battle ended, Ji Tianqing did not need to clean up the battlefield and turn to leave. He went back the way he came to find the god-slaying battleship, Yunyao, Ji Ku, and the others. Although he was confident in Pan Ruo, Yunyao, and Ji Ku's strength, there were too many beast god kings. He was still worried about the three women's safety. As the saying went, many ants could kill an elephant. With a few thousand beast god kings surrounding the god-slaying battleship and the three god kings, there was still hope for them to win. However, reality proved that Ji Tianqing's worries were unnecessary. He had only flown 100,000 miles when he saw a divine light flying over from the south. There was a divine battleship in that divine light. It was the god-slaying battleship. Seeing that the god-slaying battleship's divine light barrier was still there, and that the battleship's surface was intact without any signs of damage, Ji Tianqing finally calmed down. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the god-slaying battleship flew closer and stopped in the sky. Ji Tianqing's figure flashed, and he entered the god-slaying battleship and returned to the cockpit. Bai Long steered the god-slaying battleship and activated the aura-concealing array formation before continuing to fly north. Ji Tianqing opened his mouth and asked, "The battle is over. How are the results? Are they all safe?" Bai Long steered the battleship as he replied, "We are all unharmed, and the battleship is also safe and sound. Only the barrier was breached once, but it's nothing serious. Of the 3,800 beast god kings, we killed more than 2,300 of them." When the remaining 1,500 beast god kings saw that their beast overlord was injured and fled, their morale plummeted, and they were quickly defeated. Masters' wives only chased after more than 100 beast god kings, and they stopped chasing. They also did not want to waste time to prevent us from being in more danger, so they returned to the divine battleship and entered the divine pagoda to rest. Ji Tianqing nodded in satisfaction at this outcome. He said, "It's great that everyone is safe and sound. The incident just now was just a small interlude, and it did not cause any harm to us. However, it delayed us for some time, and it also left behind obvious traces." When the experts of the Pantheon of Immortality and the Taiyu Shrine caught up and saw the ruins that spanned tens of thousands of miles, they understood everything. Therefore, do not continue flying north in a straight line. Quickly adjust your direction and change your escape route. Next, try to conceal your aura as much as possible and keep a low profile. Do not encounter any beast overlords, and it should not be a big problem. After hearing his master's advice, Bai Long hurriedly nodded to show that he understood. "Master, don't worry, I know what to do. You can rest in peace." Ji Tianqing did not say anything else. He let Bai Long steer the battleship and returned to the Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. After entering the distorted spacetime, he first circled around the blood flame sacred tree to check on everyone's situation. Seeing that Pan Ruo, Yunyao, and Ji Ku were unharmed and were already cultivating, he did not disturb them. On the other side, Bai Feng, Ji Wuhan, and the others had been cultivating in seclusion. Now, they were at the critical moment of their breakthrough. Ji Tianqing observed for a while and saw that Bai Feng had encountered difficulties during her breakthrough. It seemed that she had not been able to solve it for a long time, so he helped. He mobilized his divine power and slowly and gently transferred it to Bai Feng. He also mixed in a trace of Taoist rhyme and his understanding and comprehension of the divine Tao law. Bai Feng, who had been stuck at a bottleneck, received the vast and mighty divine power, as well as the mysterious Taoist rhyme and cultivation experience. Instantly, her body shook slightly, and her tightly knitted brows relaxed. It was very obvious that Ji Tianqing had helped her and given her what she wanted and needed the most. Next, if she continued to cultivate, she would have an 80% chance of successfully breaking through. As for Ji Wuhan, Ji Tianqing observed for a while and found that his son's talent was extraordinary, and his comprehension was extremely strong. He had not encountered any real problems or shackles. For others, problems that could shackle them for life were often quickly comprehended and solved by Ji Wuhan. This made Ji Tianqing feel very gratified. He no longer worried about his children's cultivation. He returned to his personal spot under the sacred tree and started to cultivate and refine the Beast Overlord's divine spark fragment. Previously, he had already mastered 2,700 types of divine Tao law, and he was not far from gathering 3,000 great Taos. This Beast Overlord's divine spark fragment would definitely allow him to improve further. Chapter 4786. Other than the unlucky leader that was killed by Ji Tianqing, there were 5 other leaders in this unknown land. Their lifespans and cultivation realms were about the same. They were all divine beasts that were born in ancient times and had the strength of a mid-level god emperor. The strongest one had condensed 6 Taoist rhymes, while the weakest one had condensed 5 Taoist rhymes. Back in the realm of the gods, the Black Dragon and Qianyu that were with Ji Tianqing could be considered top-notch divine beasts. However, in the planet of origin, they were only considered juniors compared to these god-emperor-level divine beasts. The 5 leaders usually stayed in their own territories and enjoyed the cultivation resources that their people gave them. They cultivated day and night. They had lived for nearly 100,000 years and had done everything that they wanted to do in their lives. Now, their lives had returned to their natural state and were no longer interesting. What kept them alive and continued to train hard was not power or wealth, but immortality. Unfortunately, although there was no major conflict or hatred between the leaders of the beast clans, they had never formed an alliance. Moreover, they did not have the corresponding wisdom and means to explore the mystery of immortality. They only heard bits and pieces of information from the powerhouses of the various temples that were related to immortality. It was precisely because of this that the unlucky overlord from before had found out about the movements of the Temple of Indestructible, and had mobilized a large force to set up an ambush, vainly attempting to kill Ji Tianqing alone. Before he died, he was filled with remorse. In order to get the leaders to avenge him, he told them the secret of immortality. He told the leaders in a jade slip that the pantheon of immortality and the powerhouses of the Taiyu shrine were chasing after a young man from a foreign race. That guy was a mid-level god emperor and was also the chosen one of the temples. He was the one who could solve the mystery of immortality. Unfortunately, he was no match for that guy and was severely injured. He probably could not escape. If the leaders were interested, they could help him kill the chosen one and avenge him. It would also comfort his spirit. If it was possible, the unlucky lord wanted to say more to convince the other lords to help him take revenge. However, time did not allow for it, and it had to send messages to several lords, so it could only make it short. Before it died, it thought that the words "the chosen one" and "the mystery of eternal life" should be enough to move the suzerains, right? In fact, when the 5 suzerains received the message, they were all shocked and in disbelief. They would never have thought that an uninvited guest would intrude into the unknown land that had been peaceful for countless years. Furthermore, the uninvited guest from the other race was called the Heaven's Chosen One, and was being pursued by the experts of the 2 great temples. No matter how he looked at it, this news was too ridiculous to be true. The lords were all wondering if that guy was bored and made up a lie to tease them. However, after the lords calmed down and thought about it for a while, they felt that it was not impossible. That guy wasn't such a senseless person. He wouldn't make up such nonsense. Thus, they sent out messages one after another, contacting the unlucky feudal lord and asking about its current situation. The result was obvious. The unlucky feudal lord did not reply to their messages at all. Only then did the lords realize the seriousness of the matter. They became more and more convinced that something might have happened to that unlucky guy. They could not contact that feudal lord, so they sent out messages one after another, probing and asking each other if they had received the news. After some probing and verification, the lords were sure that they had all received the news. Thus, they began to communicate and discuss the authenticity of the news. After some serious discussion, the lords unanimously agreed that something might have happened to that unlucky guy. Thus, the 3 lords who were closer to him immediately said that they would gather their troops and rush over to check out the situation. Although they were only 60 to 70% sure that what the unlucky feudal lord said was true, they did not dare to fully believe the news. However, this was related to the mystery of eternal life. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, they did not want to miss it. They all wanted to take a gamble. The three overlords quickly set off with thousands of beast race god kings. The two overlords who were further away were also rather anxious. They also wanted to check out the situation, but they were too far away. It would be too late by the time they arrived. But the other three lords had already taken action. They could not be delayed and had to prepare in advance. Thus, they began to gather the Beast Clan God Kings under their command, ready to move out at a moment's notice. They also kept in contact with the other three lords and warned them that if they encountered any danger, they would definitely send reinforcements. An hour had passed since Ji Tianxing killed that unlucky feudal lord. The god-slaying warship had long since adjusted its direction and changed its route. It sped north and had already flown several million li. At this moment, the immortal god emperor's warship passed through the unknown lands and just so happened to pass by the ruins. The ruins spanning tens of thousands of li were particularly striking in the midst of the lofty mountains and precipitous ridges. The mountains and forests had been shattered and collapsed. All that was left of the ground was a massive crater and a ravine that extended into the distance. The world was silent. The dust in the air had long since dispersed, but the god kings and god emperor experts could still sense the remnants of divine power in the world. It was extremely dense, extremely mixed, and chaotic. When the immortal god emperor's warship passed by, it stopped above the ruins and carefully observed them for a while. The immortal god emperor even used a secret art to investigate the origins of these ruins and analyze the remnant divine power in the world. After 10 odd breaths of time, he raised an eyebrow and revealed a joyful expression. His spirits were roused. Yes, it's him. There's a trace of his divine power here. He fought a great battle with another god emperor here. The heaven's chosen one that he wanted to kill had fought with a powerhouse here an hour ago. This meant that he wasn't far from the heaven's chosen. If he worked a little harder, he would have a chance of catching up. However, the immortal god emperor was puzzled and he thought to himself, this is only the border of the unknown lands. Who would set up an ambush here to kill him? Could it be someone from the Taiyu shrine? That old bastard Taiyu god emperor must have predicted that the Kenshin would be able to get past our defenses and enter the unknown lands. Is that why he set up an ambush here? This was the immortal god emperor's first thought, but he immediately dismissed it. That's not right. If the Taiyu god emperor set up an ambush here, he would have had several temple lords with him. With their strength and methods, they would have been able to capture Kenshin. Moreover, the corpses scattered around the ruins don't look like they belong to the desolate race's god kings, but the beast races. In that case, which beast overlord led the beast race god kings under his command to ambush sword god here? After some speculation and analysis, the immortal god emperor determined that the beast race overlord was the one behind this ambush. Chapter 4787. This was the unknown lands, so it wasn't strange for a beast overlord and a large group of beast god kings to appear here. However, the immortal god emperor thought further. He felt that there was an even more serious danger behind this problem. He continued to analyze and ponder this problem as he steered the warship northward. This is the border of the unknown lands. The overlord that rules this area should live 200 to 300 million kilometers to the north. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't come here, nor would he station his troops here. It's most likely that he sent out scouts to gather information in my territory. After all, everyone in the world knows that I've mobilized so many people and caused so much panic. That beast overlord probably heard about Kenshin and the Chosen One, and was interested in the mystery of eternal life. That's why he led so many beast god kings to set up an ambush here. Humph. The savage beasts in this barren land wanted to live forever, and even wanted to bring people here to kill the heaven's chosen one. What wishful thinking! The immortal God Emperor responded to the beast overlord's thoughts and actions with a sneer and disdain. However, he couldn't help but think of an even more important problem. With that beast overlord's strength, there's no way he can keep Kenshin here, and it'll be very difficult for him to defeat Kenshin. There are 5 or 6 overlords in this unknown lands. Apart from that guy, have the other overlords received any information? The beast race had always moved in groups and would never fight alone. In that case, that guy must have notified the other overlords, damn it. It's already troublesome enough that the people of the Cosmos Temple are causing trouble, and now a few beast men want to interfere. The beast overlord was furious at this point, but he was also filled with worry. Originally, he was confident that he could capture Kenshin and monopolize the mystery of eternal life. However, the Taiyu God Emperor's interference gave him a headache, and he couldn't start a war with the Taiyu Shrine. Now that a few more beast overlords had appeared, the situation would only become more chaotic, and his chances of capturing Kenshin would be even lower. Thus, on his way north, he sent several messages to the other temple lords, urging them to follow him as quickly as possible. At the same time, he didn't forget to ask the soldiers guarding the defensive line if they discovered any traces of the experts from the Taiyu Shrine. He had to confirm where the Taiyu God Emperor and the other temple lords were and how much of a threat they could pose to him. On the surface, this unknown place could be considered to be peaceful, and there were no signs of unrest. But in reality, the undercurrent was already surging. All the forces were actively preparing for war and even taking action. The god-slaying battleship became the target of the various factions. It was like a small boat drifting in the treacherous sea of the unknown. Bai Long drove the warship and was extremely cautious. He did not dare to be careless. 8 days passed by. Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. He had long refined the quintessence fragment of that unlucky overlord. Not only God Emperor's godsas, but God's God T by now, he had grasped over 2,750 God laws. His strength had increased imperceptibly, and he was one step closer to reaching 3,000 perfected great Daos. This also laid a foundation for him to condense his next Dao rhyme. In addition, he had also refined the God Emperor's soul memories. Not to uncover any secrets, but to understand the situation in this unknown lands. Through the God Emperor's soul memories, Ji Tianxing learned just how vast this unknown lands was and how many overlords there were. More importantly, he knew that the God Emperor had sent a message to the other 5 beast overlords before his death. This matter gave Ji Tianxing a headache and made him feel worried. I didn't expect that the beast overlords of this unknown lands would also know about the secret of the heavenly Tao and that the 4 holy temples are searching for the chosen one. This God Emperor sure is bold. After hearing about what happened to the Pantheon of Immortality, he dared to lead a group of beast overlords to ambush me. Fortunately, he was selfish and greedy. He wanted to take the mystery of immortality for himself, so he didn't join forces with the other overlords. If he was more cautious and found the other beast overlords to work with, I would be dead by now. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianxing sat under the blood flame sacred tree and silently analyzed the situation. Now that this God Emperor is dead, he spread the news before his death. From his soul memories, the 5 beast overlords are not to be trifled with. They are all ambitious and powerful God Emperor powerhouses. There is an 80% chance that they will be interested in the mystery of immortality. Even if they don't want to avenge their overlord, they will still gather their troops to kill me. First, it was the Taiyu Shrine. Then, it was the Pantheon of Immortality. Now, there are a few beast overlords. All 3 forces are hunting me down. Ha ha ha. I thought that after killing the 4 God Emperors, I would have avenged my death and could take root in the planet of origin in peace. I didn't expect that I would offend the 4 holy temples and attract so many powerhouses to hunt me down. The identity of the Chosen One is really a public enemy. A few years ago, Ji Tianqing followed the temple masters of the Shangqing Temple to the depths of the Chaos Sea and saw the door of Heavenly Tao. At that time, although he did not personally touch the door of Heavenly Tao, he could sense something strange. He was almost certain that he was the chosen one mentioned by the four holy temples. However, he did not know the use of the chosen one, how to open the door of Heavenly Tao, and what would happen after opening the door of Heavenly Tao. Therefore, he did not take the risk and try rashly. He had always planned to explore the door of Heavenly Tao when he was strong enough after taking revenge. However, he did not expect that the situation would develop to this point. His situation was becoming more and more difficult and dangerous. At this moment, he had a very strong idea and thought. That was, to return to the Chaos Sea as soon as possible, return to the door of Heavenly Tao, and open it with his own hands. He wanted to see what benefits the identity of the Chosen One could bring him. After the door of Heavenly Tao was opened, would there be any miracles or shocking things? After a long time, Ji Tianqing ended his deductions and guesses. He calmed down and continued to cultivate. Although I've confirmed my next goal and plan, it's useless for me to let my imagination run wild. The most important thing now is to continue to improve my strength and become more powerful. If I were to fight the immortal God Emperor, I might be able to remain undefeated, or I might escape with light injuries. However, I still have no chance of winning against the Taiyu God Emperor. I have to condense the sixth Taoist rhyme as soon as possible, or even reach the upper level of the God Emperor. Only then can I stand firm on the planet of origin and not be afraid of the four holy temples, and establish my own force. With this thought in mind, Ji Tianqing went into seclusion again to study the heaven-punishing divine technique and deduce the next level of the technique. Chapter 4788. In the blink of an eye, another 5 days had passed. The god-slaying warship was still hurrying through the unknown lands. It remained invisible, its aura restrained as it flew through the air. The immortal god emperor's warship was also in hot pursuit. In order to avoid being surrounded by the beast race, the warship had also concealed its tracks and aura, but it did not slow down much. However, the path taken by the immortal god emperor was somewhat different from the path taken by Ji Tianqing. Not only was there a gap of 3 million li, there was also a deviation of more than 1 million li. Unless some accident or miracle occurred, the immortal god emperor would never be able to catch up to Ji Tianqing. But the affairs of the world were unpredictable, and the outcome was difficult to predict. On this morning, the god-slaying warship was flying over a lofty mountain range when a dazzling divine light suddenly erupted from the summit of a massive mountain. Several massive sword glows slashed at the god-slaying warship. The sudden ambush and attack made White Dragon frown fiercely. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Subconsciously, he thought that it was a formation and ambush set up by the sectmaster of one of the divine palaces on the mountain peak. But when he thought about it, he realized that the Pantheon of Immortality and the temple lords of the Taiyu Shrine were still chasing after them. They couldn't have caught up so quickly, and yet they had managed to get ahead of them and set up an ambush. This was far too frightening and unbelievable. There was only one answer. The only ones who could set up an ambush in front of them were probably the beast race lords of this unknown land. And those beast race lords might have the strength of a god emperor, but they might not be skilled in setting up formations. Even if they did, their strength would be limited. Of course, the god-slaying warship was invisible and had even concealed its aura, but it had still been discovered. This was proof that the enemy was no pushover. Although it was a long story, these thoughts flashed through White Dragon's mind in the blink of an eye. He made a decision on the spot. He steered the god-slaying warship into a barrier of divine light while also moving to the right to avoid those sword glows. But the result was still within White Dragon's expectations. Those sword glows had locked onto the god-slaying warship's aura, so how could they miss? Pang pang pang. The 4 sword lights slashed the divine light shield of the god-slaying battleship, creating a loud, muffled sound. Fragments of divine light splashed all over the sky, and rings of five-colored shockwaves spread out like ripples. The 4 streaks of sword radiance all collapsed, turning into fragments that scattered across the sky. The divine light barrier of the divine slaughtering battleship was also destroyed, breaking into pieces and scattering out countless fragments. The powerful impact forced the god-slaying battleship back dozens of miles. Bai Long activated several formations and spent a lot of effort to stabilize the god-slaying battleship in the sky. After that, Bai Long did not bother to find out what kind of formations and traps were on that mountain peak, or how many beast race elites and experts were lying in ambush there. He directly steered the god-slaying battleship toward the northeast. He had no time to hide the traces and aura of the battleship. He just sped up and ran away like a shooting star. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the god-slaying battleship charged out 40,000 miles. But that mountain peak lit up with divine light again. A divine bird that was as big as a mountain spread its wings and soared into the sky. It let out a crisp cry, and like lightning, it streaked across the sky and headed straight for the god-slaying battleship. At the same time, the formation on the mountain peak also revealed itself. It lit up with divine light and released thousands of sword lights that rained down on the god-slaying battleship. There were also thousands of beast race god kings who removed their disguises and flew into the sky from the mountain peak. They charged toward the god-slaying battleship with murderous intent. Their plan was very clear. They would let that god emperor divine bird pin down the god-slaying battleship, and then let the thousands of beast race elite god kings surround the battleship. This way, they would definitely succeed. Bai Long also realized this. He knew that the divine bird had the power of a god emperor. He knew that he could not deal with it, so he hurriedly reported to his master. Ji Tianqing was cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime to condense his 6th Tao rhyme. Currently, he had already condensed a trace of it. If he continued cultivating in seclusion for another 100 or 200 years, he would have a chance of condensing his 6th Tao rhyme. At such an important juncture of cultivation, Ji Tianqing did not want to be disturbed if it was any ordinary matter. But Bai Long's report was urgent, so he could only end his seclusion and leave the distorted spacetime. Swish! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianqing appeared in the cockpit of the god-slaying battleship, standing behind Bai Long. There was no need for Bai Long to report the situation. Ji Tianqing scanned with his divine sense and saw the situation clearly. 30,000 miles behind the battleship, that divine bird spread its wings and charged over like an arrow. It opened its sharp beak and shot out dozens of flaming light pillars that locked onto the god-slaying battleship. More than 40,000 miles behind, thousands of elite god kings roared and charged over, wanting to besiege the god-slaying battleship. Ji Tianqing knew at a glance that they had been ambushed by a beast overlord. Although he had already guessed that a few beast overlords would rush over after hearing the news, he was still surprised. What kind of method did the other party use to be able to predict his path? Not only did they ambush him with thousands of beast overlords, but they also set up an inescapable net in advance. Seeing that the divine bird had already caught up, and the dozens of flaming light pillars with the power to incinerate everything were about to hit the god-slaying battleship, Ji Tianqing did not have time to think about any more questions. He could only fly out of the god-slaying battleship and take out the sword of burial of heaven to face that divine bird head-on. Sword shattering 9 heavens. Ji Tianqing roared as his left hand formed a hand seal, and his right hand slashed out a huge divine sword that could split heaven and earth. The dark golden sword light that was 10,000 feet long had the power to split heaven and earth. The invincible sword intent slashed at the flaming light pillars with a deafening boom. Bam! 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 Those divine flame light pillars were shattered on the spot, bursting with flames that filled the sky, turning into a sea of fire. However, the huge dark golden sword did not dissipate. Instead, it was still full of power as it slashed viciously toward the divine bird. When the divine bird saw Ji Tianqing appear, its eyes lit up on the spot, flickering with a dazzling light. Its mood also became excited and excited. It was one of the beast overlords that had received the news, and it was here for the chosen one. It immediately realized that this young foreign god emperor was its target the moment it saw Ji Tianqing. Even though the two of them had not yet clashed, it could sense just how powerful its opponent was just from the power of that sword strike. It couldn't help but think to itself, no wonder that unlucky guy was killed. This Kenshin really is extraordinary. It stared intently at the divine sword light, and it knew that it would not be able to dodge or evade. Thus, divine light erupted from its body as it materialized into a huge shield and charged toward the sword light. Boom! The divine bird used its sharp beak to crash viciously into the divine sword light, and an earth-shattering boom erupted as the sword light was pulverized. Chapter 4789. Although the divine bird collided head-on with the sword light and smashed it into pieces, it was not injured. Its sharp beak was its most important weapon. It was much stronger and tougher than ordinary emperor-level divine artifacts. It was not any weaker than the sword of burial of heaven. After destroying the sword light, its sharp beak was not damaged at all. It was still shining with a dazzling divine light. Although Ji Tianqing had neutralized Yong Qian Lord's attack, he was still surprised. He stared at Yong Qian Lord's sharp beak for a while and discovered the problem. He knew that it was his opponent's strongest weapon. Therefore, he avoided it and looked for his opponent's weakness. At the same time, the god-slaying battleship was out of danger. It wasn't that Bai Long wanted to run away and abandon his master. Instead, Ji Tianqing had instructed him to ignore the beast race experts and just focus on running away as fast as he could. As for Ji Tianqing, he would stop Yong Qian Lord and the thousands of beast race god kings to prevent them from threatening the god-slaying battleship. If he could kill Yong Qian Lord, it would be for the best. If he could not kill Yong Qian Lord, he would not stay here for too long. He would find a chance to escape. With his strength and methods, as long as he wanted to leave, Yong Qian Lord and the beast race god kings would not be able to stop him. Bai Long believed in his master's strength. He could definitely do that. Even if the beast race god kings were outnumbered, his master could come and go as he pleased. The god-slaying battleship would only be a burden and distract his master. Both master and Bai Long trusted each other. That was why they could work together. In just a few breaths' time, the god-slaying battleship was like a shooting star. It flew out 100,000 miles and left the battlefield. Only Yong Qian Lord and Ji Tianqing were left. They were fighting fiercely in the sky. The thousands of beast race god kings took the opportunity to surround Ji Tianqing. They joined forces to form a battle formation and attacked Ji Tianqing from all sides, using all kinds of divine abilities and consummate skills. However, with their strength and methods, it was very difficult for them to cause any real harm to Ji Tianqing. However, they could pressure Ji Tianqing and limit Ji Tianqing's strength, creating opportunities for Yong Qian Lord. The two sides fought fiercely in the sky. It was difficult to tell who had the upper hand. Rumble. Loud noises kept coming out, reverberating between heaven and earth. Dazzling divine arts clashed in the sky. Fragments of divine light covered the sky and scattered on the ground. The earth, mountains, and forests within a radius of 30,000 miles were all destroyed by the aftermath of the battle, turning into ruins and desolation. Although Ji Tianqing was attacking Yong Qian Lord, Yong Qian Lord, Yong Qian Lord, Yong Qian Lord, Yong Qian Lord and Yong Qian Lord. The encirclement of several thousand beast race god kings could only cause him some trouble. He had to divert a portion of his attention to dodge and defend. Yong Qian Lord could even ignore most of the attacks with his emperor-level divine armor. He did not even take the god-slaying divine kings seriously. The two sides fought in the sky for about 15 minutes. Ji Tianqing and Yong Qian Lord had exchanged more than 800 blows. In the end, Ji Tianqing suffered some light injuries under the attacks of Yong Qian Lord and thousands of god-slaying divine kings. He had paid a small price for it. However, Yong Qian Lord suffered a terrible fate. Not only was he severely injured by Ji Tianqing, but his body was also severely injured. One of his wings was chopped off, and his body was covered in blood. His strength dropped drastically, and his body was covered in wounds. He was on the verge of collapsing. Even with the help of thousands of elite god-slaying divine kings, he did not dare to fight Ji Tianqing anymore. He quickly turned around and fled. It was only now that he was sure that the unlucky god-slaying divine lord was dead. After all, he was slightly stronger than the unlucky god-slaying divine lord. However, he was still severely injured and his life was in danger. From this, it could be seen that this heaven's chosen one's strength and methods were truly powerful. It was impossible for any of the god-slaying divine lords to defeat or capture him alone. Yong Qian Lord tried his best to escape, but Ji Tianqing did not give up. He chased after him for another tens of thousands of miles. Seeing the thousands of god-slaying divine kings chasing after him and Yong Qian Lord trying to escape, Ji Tianqing knew that he would have to delay the chase for a while longer if he did not use some of his trump cards. Since that was the case, Yong Qian decided to use his full strength. He used the Sword of Annihilation and locked onto Yong Qian Lord. Shwa! In the next moment, a giant golden sword that was tens of thousands of feet long appeared. With the power to destroy everything, it descended from the sky and slashed towards Yong Qian Lord. Golden light flashed as the sword chi filled the sky. It was as if the sun was hanging in the sky. The terrifying sword intent locked onto Yong Qian Lord, causing his expression to change drastically. His eyes were filled with fear. Previously, he had taken Ji Tianqing seriously and treated Ji Tianqing with caution. He had also seen Ji Tianqing's strength and means. However, he did not expect that this was Ji Tianqing's true strength. He still had such a trump card. The soul-stirring sword intent made Lord Yong Chu realize that if the sword came down, he would be dead. Not only would his body be destroyed, but his godly essence would also be destroyed. Thinking of this, Yong Qian Lord's heart was filled with anxiety. Various thoughts flashed through his mind as he tried to think of a way to dodge the sword. Although he tried his best to dodge, dodging left and right, and even using his teleportation ability, the sword was still locked onto him. However, the giant sword was locked onto it, so it was useless no matter how far it tried to run. In the end, Yong Qian Lord gave up on dodging and chose the last option. That was to fight head-on. Swoosh! He unleashed all his power and condensed a divine light shield to protect himself. At the same time, it turned around with great difficulty. Holding the belief that it was facing death with equanimity, it stuck out its sharp mouth and collided head-on with the sword light. His sharp mouth was the hardest part of his body, and it was also his main weapon. Since he wanted to block the attack of the divine sword, it was most practical to use his sharp mouth to defeat the sword chi. Kaboom! In the next moment, the Armageddon sword slashed Yong Qian Lord's sharp mouth, causing a deafening sound. Golden light burst forth in the sky as flames rose in all directions. Violent shockwaves spread out like ripples in all directions. Lord Yong Qian had thought that it would be able to survive at the cost of being severely injured or even having its body destroyed. However, it turned out that he had underestimated Ji Tianqing's strength and means. The Sword of Annihilation, with its terrifying power, instantly shattered its mouth and split its body into two halves. The violent sword chi tore his broken body into pieces, turning it into countless pieces of flesh and blood that scattered between heaven and earth. As for the godly essence in his head, it was also shattered by the Armageddon sword, turning into dozens of godly essence fragments that scattered on the ground. Chapter 4790. For the past tens of thousands of years, Yongqian Overlord had been staying in his territory and cultivating in seclusion in pursuit of a higher realm. Normally, he was one of the more ordinary overlords of the beast race. He was not high profile, did not cause trouble, and was not the most shrewd. However, like the other overlords of the beast race, he had a deep obsession and pursuit of immortality. In addition, his territory was very close to the unlucky overlord and he was the first to arrive. Therefore, he had used all kinds of methods to finally intercept Ji Tianqing. However, his cultivation was not enough and he was killed by the sword of the burial of heaven. Originally, the several thousand beast race god kings were still chasing after Ji Tianqing with murderous intent, vowing to capture him. After witnessing Yongqian Overlord being killed by Ji Tianqing, the thousands of beast race godly kings were all dumbfounded. They were all shocked and terrified. They never thought that their powerful overlord would be killed by the foreign race's god emperor just like that. The sudden blow stunned them for a moment. The confidence and morale in their hearts suffered a devastating blow. When they came back to their senses, there was no need for anyone to give them an order. All of them turned around and fled in the opposite direction. Even their overlord was killed. What could they, who were only god kings, do? There was absolutely no way to reverse the situation and change the situation of the battle. It was even more impossible to avenge the Lord. All they could do was run away and save their lives. Swoosh! Swoosh! The thousands of beast race god kings scattered like birds. In order to save their lives, they ran in different directions. As such, even if Ji Tianqing wanted to kill them, he would not be able to kill them all. There would definitely be some that escaped. In fact, Ji Tianqing did not plan to kill them. After picking up Yongqian Overlord's quintessence shard, he quickly left. His original goal was to stop Yongqian Overlord and let the god-slaying battleship escape. If Yongqian Overlord was difficult to deal with, he would also find an opportunity to escape and chase after the god-slaying battleship. He did not plan to kill Yongqian Overlord. However, Yongqian Overlord was not strong enough. After fighting for 15 minutes, he was severely injured and showed signs of defeat. That was why he suddenly had the idea of killing Lord Yongqian. After all, he was at a critical juncture in his cultivation. He needed the God Emperor's quintessence shard to gather the 3,000 great Tao and increase his strength quickly. Yongqian Overlord had the strength of a God Emperor and had condensed 5 Taoist rhymes. He was the perfect candidate. For this reason, Ji Tianqing decided to kill Lord Yongqian first before leaving. It had to be said that the overlord of the beast tribe that Ji Tianqing had killed, whose name was unknown, was already unlucky enough. Who would have thought that Lord Yongqian would not fare any better? He was just as unlucky. In of the beast race god kings, the beast race, and god emperor. Ji Tianqing also left the battlefield and flew north as fast as lightning. After flying north for hundreds of thousands of miles, he caught up with the god-slaying battleship. The white dragon followed his instructions. After leaving the battlefield, it flew at a leisurely pace while ensuring its own safety. After Ji Tianqing returned to the battleship, the white dragon controlled the battleship's array and continued to speed up. That was the end of the episode. Yongqian Overlord was dead. The beast race god kings under his command did not have the ability to avenge him. As for Ji Tianqing, he had already left on the god-slaying battleship. He did not leave any traces behind. Only the ruins that were tens of thousands of kilometers wide still remained on that battlefield, silently telling the story of how tragic the battle had been at that time. If there were no accidents, only the beast race under Yongqian Overlord and the surrounding beast race experts would be lucky enough to see the ruins. However, accidents still happened. Of course, it was not an accident. It was inevitable. The immortal God Emperor's battleship was flying southwest of the ruins, about 1,000,000 miles away. Originally, the path of the divine ship would not have passed through the ruins, so the immortal God Emperor would not have been able to see the traces left behind by Ji Tianqing. However, the thousands of beast race god kings under Overlord Yong Feng's command all fled in all directions in order to avoid Ji Tianqing's pursuit. One of the groups consisted of more than 200 beast race god kings. As they were fleeing, they happened to be in the path of the immortal God Emperor's battleship. In fact, the thousands of beast race god kings had been divided into dozens of small groups. Each group had 100 or 200 people. These groups were all fleeing south. Many of them were fleeing southeast, southwest, and due south. Thus, it was normal for one of the groups to run into the immortal God Emperor's battleship. Whoosh! The immortal God Emperor's battleship suddenly stopped in the sky. On the surface, the battleship did not seem to have changed, but the people inside had all begun to move and enter battle mode. 30,000 miles away, a dazzling divine light was flying over in a panic. There were over 200 beast god kings in the divine light, and some of them were even injured. They seemed to be in rather horrible and miserable shapes. However, the immortal God Emperor's battleship had remained invisible and had concealed its aura. The 200 beast race god kings who were fleeing for their lives did not notice it at all, nor did they know that there was an even greater danger waiting for them. Thus, they were quickly met with tragedy. Within the battleship, the immortal God Emperor noticed the abnormality and guessed that there must be some clues or information behind those 200 beast race god kings. Thus, he decisively ordered the battleship to open fire. The battleship activated its divine cannons, and after a short period of charging, it fired more than 300 beams of divine power. Boom! 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 A deafening explosion reverberated through the heavens. The beams of divine flame carried with them the power to destroy everything as they slammed into the crowd of beast race god kings. The 200 or so beast god kings were caught off guard, so they suffered a sudden, devastating attack. They did not even have the chance to resist or dodge, so they obviously suffered heavy casualties. There was a dazzling flash of divine light, and then a rain of blood and severed limbs rained down from the sky. More than half of the beast race god kings were killed by the battleship's cannon fire. The 100 beast race god kings who were lucky enough to survive were also severely injured. They fled in panic and despair. At this moment, the immortal God Emperor issued another order. The battleship's cabin doors opened, and more than 1,000 elite god kings flew out and scattered in every direction. In a short 100 breaths of time, the 1,000 elite god kings had captured nearly 100 beast race god kings and brought them back to the battleship. The immortal God Emperor had been waiting in the main hall of the battleship for a long time. Once the beast race god kings were brought back, he would personally interrogate them and obtain the information he needed. Chapter 4791. Most of the beast race god kings were stubborn and refused to reveal their secrets no matter what kind of torture they suffered. However, there were always some beasts who were afraid of death. In order to survive, they told the others everything that had happened, including the information about Lord Yongqian. The undying God Emperor was very excited to get the information he wanted. Previously, I was worried that the beast overlords would come and interfere after receiving the news and ruin my grand plan. Now, it seems that this is not a bad thing. At the very least, those stupid beast overlords can still help me stop him and delay his escape. That guy is not far away. I will be able to catch up to him in a few more days. However, there is one thing worth noting. The battle between him and Yongqian Overlord is in the northeast. This means that he has changed his escape route. If I continue to head north in a straight line, I will never be able to catch up to him. These thoughts flashed through the undying God Emperor's mind. He had a new plan for his next move. Without hesitation, he hurriedly ordered the battleship to change its course and head northeast for a distance. 3/4 of an hour later, the battleship arrived at the ruins, which were tens of thousands of kilometers in radius. Looking at the devastated land and sensing the remnant aura of the God Emperor, the undying God Emperor calmed down. This is the divine aura he left behind. There is no doubt about it. With the facts confirmed, the undying God Emperor no longer had any doubts. He ordered his soldiers to kill all the beast race god kings. The beast race god kings were all terrified, especially the ones who had revealed the truth. They all started cursing furiously. They cursed the undying God Emperor for not keeping his word and for doing such a shameless thing. They cursed him to die a horrible death. However, the immortal God Emperor turned a deaf ear to them. The soldiers under his command quickly shut the mouths of the beast race's god kings. They would never be able to speak again. After all the captives were killed, their corpses were thrown out of the warship and into the scorched earth, making the ruins even more bloody. The battleship swaggered off, streaking across the sky like a stream of light, quickly disappearing into the horizon. Once the immortal God Emperor had determined the direction and route they would take, he sped up and gave chase, full of anticipation. The White Dragon steered the god-slaying battleship forward. Ji Tianqing stayed in the distorted spacetime and cultivated. He first refined Yong Qian Overlord's quintessence shard not only to absorb some divine Tao laws but also to prepare for condensing the sixth Tao rhyme. More importantly, he wanted to refine Lord Yong Qian's memories and understand the power structure of this unknown place. Only by knowing how many beast lords were here, what realm they were at, and what they were doing, could he have a clearer grasp of the situation. Without a doubt, Ji Tianqing had done it. It took him 10 days to refine Lord Yong Qian's quintessence fragment in the distorted spacetime. He had absorbed a lot of divine power, and he had also lost 50 divine Tao laws. Presently, the number of laws he grasped was as many as 2,800. Naturally, his strength had increased, and he was much more powerful than before. However, what he cared about the most was that he had obtained Lord Yong Qian's memories, which gave him a clearer understanding of the power structure and situation of this unknown place. Previously, he knew that there were 5 overlords in this unknown place, and he knew the name and realm of each overlord. The latest news he had was that the other overlords had started to move. Other than Lord Yong Qian, who he had just killed, Lord Sang Lu was also on his way to kill him. The other 2 overlords were further away, and they might not be able to make it in time. However, based on Lord Yong Qian's understanding of the other 2, they would definitely not sit by and do nothing. They would definitely want a share of the loot, so they should be on their way. Lord Sang Lu, Middle Realm God Emperor, has condensed 5 Tao rhymes, and has many beast race god kings under his command. He should be able to gather at least 4,000 god kings in a short time, Ji Tianqing silently analyzed as these thoughts flashed through his mind. He knew very well that he was most likely to meet Lord Sang Lu in the upcoming battle. As for the Pantheon of Immortality and the people of the Taiyu Shrine, they should not be a threat to him for the time being. Unknowingly, an entire day had passed in the outside world. The god-slaying warship had traveled 100 million miles to the north, and it was still in stealth mode, concealing its aura. The immortal God Emperor's warship had been following Ji Tianqing from behind. However, this warship was slightly faster than the god-slaying warship. The distance between the 2 warships had shrunk from the initial 3 to 4 million miles. After a day, the distance between the 2 warships had shrunk to 2,300,000 miles. To the left of the immortal God Emperor's warship, about 20 million miles away, there was another warship speeding along. That was the Taiyu God Emperor's warship. Not only him, but also the 4th and 5th Palace Masters were on it. As for the 2nd and 3rd Palace Masters, they were still 10 million miles behind. The experts of the 2 god palaces were pursuing Ji Tianqing, forming a long line that passed through the middle of the unknown. Only when the heavens looked down on this unknown land could they clearly see the overall situation. To the right of the god-slaying warship, about 5 million miles away, a streak of divine light was rapidly approaching. Even further to the north, several hundred million miles away, were two groups led by the God Emperor's experts, marching south. Simply put, the god-slaying warship seemed safe for now. But in reality, the warship was being pursued from behind, and the beast race lords were rushing to intercept it. Ji Tianqing had never escaped danger, constantly hovering on the edge of life and death. If he made the slightest mistake, there was a chance that he would die. What happened next proved this point. 4 hours later. As the god-slaying warship was advancing, it encountered a dazzling streak of divine light. That streak of divine light drifted over from the horizon, as if it had long since discovered the god-slaying warship and was charging straight at it. The white dragon had been vigilant this entire time, and when he saw that streak of divine light flying over, he became nervous. Without hesitation, he had the warship maintain its concealment while steering it to the right. He wanted to see if the other party had discovered him, or if it was just a coincidence. In the end, that streak of divine light also changed directions and continued to charge at the god-slaying warship. Reality proved that the expert in that streak of divine light had long since discovered the god-slaying warship and locked onto it. The white dragon hurriedly increased his speed, and at the same time, he woke up his cultivating master. He knew that another beast race lord had arrived. A great battle was inevitable. Chapter 4792. Ji Tianqing was at a critical juncture of his closed-door cultivation. He had just condensed the embryonic form of his sixth Daoist rhyme and was about to take the opportunity to condense his Daoist rhyme and complete the sixth Daoist rhyme in one go. However, Bai Long's call interrupted his cultivation. He could only leave the distorted spacetime and appear in the cockpit of the battleship. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing appeared behind Bai Long in a flash of white light. Without waiting for Bai Long to report the situation, he released his divine perception and spread it out. After covering a radius of tens of thousands of miles, he immediately saw the situation clearly. Damn it, why is there another one? Ji Tianqing frowned. A cold light flashed in his eyes and his body emitted a strong murderous intent. Although he had expected to encounter one or two beast overlords along the way, he did not expect it to happen so quickly. He did not need to guess to know that the God Emperor of the beast tribe in the divine light ahead was definitely Lord Songlu. According to his estimation, Lord Songlu would leave his territory and come here to kill him at least half a day later. Since the time was half a day earlier, one could imagine how anxious Lord Songlu was and how impatient he was. The divine light was only 30,000 miles away from the god-slaying battleship. Ji Tianqing's divine perception had already penetrated the divine light and saw the many figures in it. As he expected, there were more than 2,000 figures in the divine light. They were basically all godly king realm experts of the beast tribe. The leader was the most powerful and had reached the middle level of the God Emperor. It was a huge grayish-black bird with a wingspan of almost 10,000 feet. It was as huge as a mountain and looked like a divine eagle or a vulture. It exuded a fierce aura. The other 2,000 godly king realm beasts came from different clans and had different appearances. Of course, this was not important. Ji Tianqing only needed to confirm their identities and origins, as well as their numbers and strength. Lord Songlu's wings lit up with divine light and his body emitted a strong murderous intent. He was about to attack in the next moment. The 2,000 godly king realm beasts also got into an attacking formation, ready to attack. A great battle was about to break out. Ji Tianqing decided to make the first move. He turned invisible and flew out of the god-slaying battleship into the sky. He used all of his power, his left hand clenched into a fist and punched out a mountain-sized shadow of a dragon and elephant. His right hand swung the sword and slashed out 1,000 feet long golden sword towards the divine light. Thus, in the seemingly calm sky, a mountain-sized fist shadow and a gigantic golden sword light suddenly appeared. Within the divine light, Overlord Heron and more than 2,000 beasts revealed astonished and shocked expressions. This was especially so for Lord Heron. He knew that his opponent wasn't someone to be trifled with, yet he actually dared to take the initiative to attack. His expression grew even more solemn. The beast race god kings who reacted quickly all unleashed their divine powers and used all sorts of divine abilities to counter the dragon elephant fist shadow and the 1,000 feet long sword light. Lord Heron did not stay idle either. He released hundreds of sharp blades of divine light, which rained down like a rain of arrows, attacking the fist shadows and sword radiance. Boom! Ping ping ping! In the next instant, the divine light that filled the sky clashed with the dragon elephant fist and sword, producing a deafening boom that reverberated throughout the world. Unsurprisingly, the divine art attacks released by the beast race god kings were all shattered by the dragon elephant fist. The hundreds of sharp blades of divine light released by Lord Heron were also mostly destroyed by the giant sword. They turned into divine light fragments that scattered in all directions. The draconic elephant divine fist and the 1,000 feet long giant sword did not dissipate, but their power and speed had decreased significantly. Lord Heron had successfully dodged the gigantic sword's attack, but the draconic elephant divine fist and the gigantic sword had struck the divine light. They had also struck more than 200 unlucky godly monarchs. Boom! Amidst the loud boom, the dazzling divine light was shattered. Fragments of divine light splattered across the sky, producing a powerful shockwave. The 200 or so unlucky beast race god kings were instantly smashed into pieces by the draconic elephant divine fist and the giant sword. They died instantly. Before Lord Heron and company even saw their opponent, they were already intimidated by their opponent. More than 200 of them were killed or injured. This caused the Heron overlord to lose face, and he flew into a rage on the spot. He roared angrily and locked onto the god-slaying battleship's aura. He opened his sharp mouth and spewed out a few streaks of divine flames. White Dragon steered the god-slaying battleship. He wanted to dodge, but he was powerless. He could only watch helplessly as the divine flames struck the battleship's defensive barrier. Boom! With a dull boom, the entire god-slaying battleship was engulfed by the blazing divine flames. However, the divine light barrier trembled violently. After shaking dozens of times, it gradually calmed down. Apart from cracks appearing on the barrier's surface and greatly reducing its strength, it was fine. The powerful impact pushed the god-slaying battleship dozens of miles away. White Dragon steered the battleship. After it stabilized in the sky, he hurriedly activated the array formation to repair the divine light barrier. On the other side, Lord Heron had already found the culprit. He locked onto Ji Tianqing's aura. Even if Ji Tianqing remained invisible, he could still detect Ji Tianqing's location and determine Ji Tianqing's strength. Middle stage God Emperor. His strength is similar to mine. It should be him. Lord Heron quickly identified his target and ignored the god-slaying battleship. He used all his strength and launched an attack on Ji Tianqing. He flapped his wide wings and opened his sharp mouth. He spewed out more than a dozen pillars of divine flames. He also released divine blades that filled the sky as he charged at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing showed no mercy. He brandished his sword and used Sword Dao divine powers to fight Lord Heron. The 2,000 beast race godly monarchs could not see the invisible Ji Tianqing. They could not lock onto his location, so they naturally could not attack. They could only turn their attention to the god-slaying battleship and attack it with all their might. They swore to destroy the battleship. Of course, White Dragon would not sit still and wait for death. He had already activated the divine cannons and launched a fierce bombardment at the beast race godly monarchs. Bam! 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 360 dazzling pillars of divine power lit up the sky for tens of thousands of miles. They enveloped all the beast race godly monarchs, clearly illuminating their terrified and despairing faces. Even though they desperately used their divine powers and supreme skills to form massive shields to block the divine cannon's attacks. But it was all for naught. Following a loud rumble, the divine light barriers of the beast race godly monarchs shattered. Dozens of unlucky beast race godly monarchs were killed on the spot by the divine cannons. They were pulverized and not even their corpses were left. Hundreds of beast race godly monarchs managed to survive, but they were heavily injured by the divine cannons. They were covered in blood and looked extremely miserable. Such casualties did not deter the 2,000 beast race godly monarchs. Instead, it angered them even more. They quickly spread out in all directions in the sky and formed a massive encirclement that surrounded the god-slaying battleship. Chapter 4793. The battle began and it was extremely intense. The battlefield was split into two parts. On one side, more than 2,000 beast godly monarchs surrounded the god-slaying battleship. On the other side, Lord Heron and Ji Tianqing were locked in an intense battle. The surrounding 15,000 kilometers had become a battlefield. It was enveloped in dazzling divine light as countless divine technique projections shuttled back and forth, crisscrossing each other. Loud rumbles rang out incessantly as the divine light in the sky flickered. Destructive shockwaves of divine power spread outwards like ripples. After exchanging a few blows, the outcome of the battle became apparent. Ji Tianqing's combat strength was stronger than Lord Heron's. He suppressed him from the very beginning and forced him to retreat. He could only defend himself tirelessly. After exchanging 6 or 7 blows, Lord Heron could not hold on any longer and quickly retreated. 10 blows later, Ji Tianqing pierced through Lord Heron's left wing. He began to bleed and his strength began to decline. As time passed, Lord Songlu's defeat was a foregone conclusion. Even being killed by Ji Tianqing was unavoidable. On the other side, the 2,000 beast godly monarchs surrounded the god-slaying battleship. It was extremely successful. Although the god-slaying battleship was an emperor-level divine artifact with powerful offensive strength and defense, it was still a 1,000-foot-long battleship. It was not agile enough. Even though White Dragon controlled the battleship with all his might and constantly launched counterattacks, he did manage to kill a few hundred beast godly monarchs and injure many others. However, this number of casualties was still acceptable for the 2,000 beast godly monarchs. Furthermore, it only infuriated them and made them charge even more valiantly. They formed an encirclement and worked together to form a battle formation. They released their divine ability attacks one after another and rained down on the god-slaying battleship. The god-slaying battleship's divine light barrier would be broken every 30 seconds. Then, White Dragon had no choice but to control the formation and reform it. The first 2 or 3 times were still fine. However, after a few more times, the god-slaying battleship expended too much energy and its strength began to decline. White Dragon had no choice but to adjust his counterattack strategy. He launched fewer counterattacks and focused more on defense. As time passed, the god-slaying battleship situation became more and more passive. Perhaps after 15 minutes or an hour, the god-slaying battleship's defenses would not last any longer. It would definitely be breached by the beast godly monarchs. White Dragon was filled with anxiety and worry, but he couldn't disturb his master and distract him. He had no choice but to send a voice transmission to awaken his master's wife and God Emperor. After a short while, 3 divine lights flashed and appeared in the cockpit of the battleship one after another. Whoosh! Whoosh! Great Wisdom God Emperor, Yun Yao, and Ji Ko heard that Ji Tianqing was ambushed and they ended their secluded cultivation. They released their divine sense to quickly assess the situation on the battlefield. Then, God Emperor Bo Ri charged out of the god-slaying battleship and brandished his sword at Overlord Songlu, assisting Ji Tianqing in dealing with his opponent quickly. Meanwhile, Yin Yao and Ji Ku rushed out of the god-slaying battleship and brandished their swords and divine spears. They charged at the surrounding beast race god kings to reduce the pressure on the god-slaying battleship. Such a distribution of manpower was the most appropriate. Hanya had the strength of a mid-stage god emperor. Ji Tianqing could already suppress Lord Heron. Once she joined the battle, Ji Tianqing would be like a tiger that had grown wings. He would completely defeat Lord Heron and end the battle faster. As for the god-slaying battleship, even if it was at a disadvantage, it would not be defeated in a short time. With Yun Yao and Ji Ku's help, they could neutralize the attacks of many beast-godly monarchs. They could also slaughter a large number of them to lessen the pressure on the god-slaying battleship. This plan quickly took effect. After the godly monarchs joined the battle, they fought side by side with Ji Tianqing. They attacked Lord Heron together. Lord Heron was shocked and angry. He knew that he was no match for the other party, so he stopped attacking and tried his best to escape. However, Ji Tianqing chased after him relentlessly, suppressing him so that he could not escape. The Prajna God Emperor also assisted from the side, constantly releasing divine abilities and ultimate skills, all of which were aimed at Lord Heron's fatal spots. In just a few rounds, Lord Heron was pierced with dozens of bloody holes. Its wings were also cut into pieces, and its body was covered in blood. Due to its heavy injuries, its strength was greatly reduced. Blood flowed from all over its body, and it constantly let out painful howls. Ji Tianqing's pursuit became more and more ferocious. The Prajna God Emperor also used all of his power to launch a storm of attacks. Lord Heron complained incessantly after being beaten up. He begged for mercy several times or tried to negotiate with Ji Tianqing, but there was no response. Ji Tianqing was too lazy to pay attention to it. From the moment it decided to attack, it was destined to die. There wasn't any deep hatred between the two of them. It was just that Lord Heron was unlucky and had a death wish. It knew that the chosen one, Kenshin, was a difficult character to deal with, but it still dared to intercept him alone. This was confidence and arrogance. Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing had been in a hurry to increase his strength and condense his sixth Taoist rhyme. He just so happened to lack some of the God Emperor's divine spark fragments. Thus, Lord Heron was doomed. Another 30 breaths of time passed. Lord Heron resisted Ji Tianqing and Prajna's attacks while retreating north. It had already retreated 200,000 kilometers. When the two sides shifted the battlefield, the mountains and forests along the way were all destroyed, leaving behind only a scene of desolation. Smoke and dust filled the world, and it was also filled with the aura of berserk divine power. Lord Heron's injuries were extremely tragic. Its divine body was on the verge of collapse. It was already an arrow at the end of its flight and could die at any time. The Prajna God Emperor took advantage of the opportunity to pursue and exchange another blow with Lord Heron, forcing it back dozens of kilometers. Ji Tianqing, who was ready to attack, took the opportunity to chase after it. He used his trump card and launched the final attack. Sword of Annihilation. It drew on the power of the five-elemental world and condensed a giant golden sword of light that was tens of thousands of meters long. It carried the power to destroy everything and slashed down from the sky toward Lord Heron. Lord Heron knew that its aura had been locked onto by the sword. There was no way it could dodge or withstand it. If the sword slashed down, it would definitely die. Since the outcome was already decided and could not be changed, the only thing it could do was send a message before it died. It used its fastest speed to send a message to inform the other orc overlord and give it a warning. Not for anything else, it only hoped that those two lords would not be as impatient as it and Yong Qian Lord, who went into battle alone and ended up dead. If the two overlords could join forces and plan carefully, it was very likely that they could defeat Kenshin. Of course, if they could join forces to kill Kenshin, it could be considered as revenge for it. Whoosh! When the Sword of Annihilation descended and enveloped Lord Heron's figure, a spiritual light soared into the sky and disappeared into the depths of the vault of heaven. The message was sent, but Lord Heron was also swallowed by the Sword of Annihilation. Boom! A dull sound rang out, and a dazzling splash of blood. Lord Heron's body collapsed, turning into fragments that filled the sky. Blood splattered across the sky. Even its godhead was shattered on the spot. /book_15878/Path of Immortality. Chapter 4794. Just like that, Overlord Song Lu fell. His godhead shattered into a dozen shards that scattered across the sky. They were 200,000 kilometers away from the battlefield. The 2,000 beast race god kings did not see the scene of Overlord Song Lu's death, nor were they aware of the news for the time being. After the battle ended, Ji Tianqing picked up Overlord Song Lu's godhead shards with a wave of his hand and left with Hanya God Emperor. When the two returned to the battlefield, the beast race god kings were still attacking the God-Slayer battleship. However, the situation on the battlefield had changed. The number of beast race god kings had decreased significantly. The huge encirclement still existed, but the number of beast race god kings had decreased to a little over 1,800. Yun Yao and Ji Ku were still fighting with all their might. They kept reaping the lives of the beast race god kings and helped the God-Slayer battleship relieve some of the pressure. White Dragon also controlled the God-Slayer battleship and fired back with its divine cannons. At the same time, he had to repair the godlight barrier of the battleship. Currently, both sides were evenly matched. Although the God-Slayer battleship was surrounded, it would not be in any danger for the time being. Yun Yao and Ji Ku were also in peak condition. They were not injured, nor had they expended much of their divine power. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Hanya God Emperor return, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and White Dragon perked up. They did not need to ask to know that Overlord Song Lu had been killed by Ji Tianqing. This allowed them to heave a sigh of relief. When they attacked the beast race god kings again, they were even more confident. As for the 1,800 beast race god kings, they were filled with shock. Their emotions were extremely complicated. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Hanya God Emperor return, some of the smarter beast race god kings had already guessed that Overlord Song Lu had been killed. Even if he had not been killed, he had been defeated and had fled with serious injuries. Since that was the case, how could they be a match for Kenshin without Overlord Song Lu's support? Some of the beast race god kings were still shouting and roaring. They looked like they were about to charge forward and attack Ji Tianqing and Hanya God Emperor. However, a portion of the god kings of the beast race retreated stealthily, preparing to turn around and flee. As long as Ji Tianqing was willing, he could bring Pan Roa, Yun Yao and Ji Ku to kill all 1,800 god kings. However, that would waste too much time, and there was not much meaning to it. Therefore, Ji Tianqing directly took out Lord Heron's quintessence fragment and released a sacred pressure. He coldly shouted, "I've already killed Lord Heron. Do you still want to put up a resistance and seek your own death?" His loud and dignified voice reverberated through the sky, causing all the god kings to see stars and gape in shock. They couldn't believe that this was true. They all thought that Ji Tianqing was bluffing. However, the quintessence fragment in Ji Tianqing's hand wouldn't lie. It clearly had Lord Heron's aura, so the 1,000-odd orc god kings had no choice but to believe it. Therefore, no one doubted the authenticity of the news anymore. They were all filled with fear and panic as they turned around and fled. Since Lord Heron was dead, what was the point of continuing to besiege Kenshin? If they didn't flee, they would soon be slaughtered by Kenshin and buried with Lord Heron. In the blink of an eye, the 1,800 beast race god kings scattered in all directions, fleeing for their lives. Ji Tianqing, Pan Roa and the others didn't pursue them. They allowed the god kings to escape and returned to the God-Slayer battleship. No one was injured in the previous battle. They only used up some divine power. After returning to the battleship, Ji Tianqing, Pan Roa and the others entered the distorted spacetime of the Divine Pagoda to continue cultivating in seclusion. Bai Long continued to pilot the God-Slayer battleship. He concealed his tracks and aura as he rushed north. In the distorted spacetime, under the blood flame sacred tree. Pan Ruo, the God Emperor, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku had all gone to cultivate. Ji Tianqing held Lord Heron's quintessence fragment and pondered silently. Of the 5 beast overlords in this unknown land, 3 have already been slain by me. They all tried to kill me alone, but I killed them one by one. Before Lord Heron died, he sent out a message. It's probably to inform the other 2 overlords, hoping that they can avenge him. As long as those 2 overlords aren't idiots, they won't act rashly. They definitely won't dare to try to kill me alone. They'll definitely work together and won't act rashly. I shouldn't have to worry about their ambushes for the time being. I only have to worry about the Pantheon of Immortality and the Taiyu Shrine. In other words, he would be safe for a period of time after killing Lord Heron. However, Ji Tianqing had a vague premonition that the next time he was intercepted by the God Emperor, it wouldn't be so easy. Once they tried to kill him, it would either be the 2 beast overlords working together or the powerhouses of the 2 great temples. In short, the next time he was intercepted, it would definitely be very dangerous. His top priority now was to refine Lord Heron's quintessence fragment as soon as possible and try to condense the 6th Taoist rhyme as soon as possible. After making up his mind, he put away his various thoughts and began to cultivate without any distractions. He first refined Lord Heron's quintessence fragment, absorbing his divine power and divine Tao laws and refining his divine soul memories. The distorted spacetime was very quiet. Everyone was focused on cultivating and forgot about the passage of time. Unknowingly, half a month had passed. Ji Tianqing had successfully refined Lord Heron's quintessence fragment. His divine power had increased further, and he had also obtained more than 40 divine Tao laws. The number of divine Tao laws he had mastered now reached 2,850. He only needed to master 150 more divine Tao laws to gather 3,000 great Taos. In addition, he had refined Lord Heron's divine soul memories and had a deeper understanding of the situation in the unknown lands. The more divine Tao laws he mastered, the more solid his foundation for condensing the 6th Taoist rhyme would be. Therefore, he continued to cultivate in seclusion and focused on condensing the Taoist rhyme. Not long ago, before he had killed Lord Yongqian, he had condensed the 6th Taoist rhyme with his own strength and comprehension. If he had cultivated step by step, he would have needed at least 100 years to condense the 6th Taoist rhyme. However, it was different now. He had killed 2 beast overlords in the Middle God Emperor realm and refined their quintessence fragments. This was very helpful to him and could also save him a lot of time. Only half a month had passed in the outside world, but he had already cultivated in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for 2 years. The results of his cultivation were very obvious. His 6th Taoist rhyme had basically taken shape and could be considered to have been successfully condensed. However, he still needed many years of cultivation and accumulation to fill and perfect the 6th Taoist rhyme. According to his estimation, it would take at least 20 years for the 6th Taoist rhyme to be truly completed. At the same time, the god-slaying battleship flew for another half a month in the unknown lands and had already arrived in the northern region. In a few days, they would be able to rush out of the unknown lands and enter the Chaos Sea. This region was the territory of the remaining 2 beast overlords. Chapter 4795. The 2 beast overlords were called Jadefall and Illusionary. Both of them had lived for nearly 100,000 years and were divine beasts born in the primordial era. They had unique talents and remarkable strength. Both of them were intermediate God Emperor, but one of them had condensed 5 Taoist rhymes, while the other had condensed 6. Bai Luo and Su Sheng had more than 100 billion divine beasts, mutated beasts, and ferocious beasts under their command. They could quickly gather thousands of divine king realm beasts. The God-Slayer worship had entered the territory of these 2 overlords. The white dragon was naturally cautious and did not dare to be careless. However, some things were destined to happen. There was no avoiding them. Before Overlord Song Lu died, Bai Luo and Su Sheng received the message he sent before he died. At the time, Bai Luo and Su Sheng were leading thousands of Divine King elites toward the south, preparing to kill Ji Tianqing. However, when they learned that Overlord Song Lu had tried to kill Kenshin alone and had fallen into a desperate situation, they changed their minds on the spot. The two of them quickly contacted each other and urgently discussed countermeasures. It was useless to continue heading south. By the time they arrived, Kenshin would have already left. According to Kenshin's route, he was heading north. In other words, Bai Luo and Su Sheng did not need to actively seek out Kenshin. They only needed to set up ambushes along Kenshin's path and wait for him to come. Moreover, Kenshin had already killed 3 of the 5 beast overlords. Reality proved that no one was Kenshin's match. Anyone who fought him alone would be killed. Even if Bai Luo and Su Sheng were confident that they were stronger than overlords Yong Qian and Song Lu, it was useless. There were already 3 precedents, so how could they dare to gamble with their lives? The best way to deal with this was for them to work together and set up ambushes along Kenshin's path in advance, waiting for Kenshin to walk right into their trap. Bai Luo and Su Sheng hit it off immediately. They quickly changed their strategy and put it into action. Half a day later, the two of them gathered together and began to set up an inescapable net, as well as a formation to detect Kenshin's whereabouts and various traps. The 6,000 God Kings under the two of them were split into several dozen groups and sent out. They formed a long line of defense in the vast forest and mountains. Although there were only a few dozen beast race God Kings in each troop, it was impossible for them to stop Kenshin with their strength and methods. However, Bai Luo and Su Sheng had ordered them to report the Kenshin's whereabouts as soon as they discovered them. He did not expect them to intercept or obstruct Kenshin. As long as they could find Kenshin, it would be a great achievement. In addition, Bai Luo and Su Sheng also used their innate abilities to search for the Godslayer worship and Kenshin. After 9 days of preparation, their arrangements were quite adequate, and they were finally seeing results. At this moment, the monarch of Jadefall was patrolling the Cloud Sea with a group of guards, his divine sense covering an area of 200,000 kilometers. At the same time, he also used his innate ability, God's Eye, to carefully observe the situation within 100,000 kilometers. Even if Kenshin could hide his presence and escape his divine sense, there was no way he could escape his innate ability, God's Eye. Just as expected. When he flew over a majestic mountain range, his divine sense detected a faint wisp of divine power 100,000 kilometers to the south. If the monarch of Jadefall was careless, he would not have noticed that wisp of divine power and would definitely have missed it. However, he was very cautious and predicted that Kenshin would likely arrive today. Thus, he used his innate ability, God's Eye, to carefully observe the scene in the southern sky. Soon, its ink-blue eyes saw through all the disguises. It discovered that a divine warship was speeding toward them from 100,000 miles to the south. Without any hesitation, the monarch of Jadefall immediately determined that it was Kenshin's warship. He hurriedly sent out a message and called for Su Sheng's help. Meanwhile, it had used a secret technique to hide itself and the 100 God King guards. It had concealed all of its divine power. He stealthily approached the Godslayer warship with his guards, but he was not in a hurry to appear or attack. Seeing the Godslayer warship getting closer and closer to the north, he hurriedly followed. The Godslayer warship was very fast, but the monarch of Jadefall was not slow either. Even though he had 100 guards and had to cast a spell to hide his presence, he was not shaken off by the Godslayer warship and continued to follow closely. Unfortunately, Bai Long, who was piloting the Godslayer warship, had yet to break through to the God Emperor realm. The difference in strength between him and the monarch of Jadefall was too great. He was focused on piloting the warship and did not realize that the monarch of Jadefall had been secretly following behind. Just like that, the Godslayer warship flew forward for about 15 minutes, crossing hundreds of mountains. At this time, the monarch of Jadefall finally arrived with a group of god kings. He appeared to the right of the God-Slayer worship, and when he was still 200,000 kilometers away, the monarch of Jadefall sensed him. Without any hesitation, he immediately attacked. Whoosh! Whoosh! The monarch of Jadefall followed behind the God-Slayer worship about 30,000 kilometers away. He exerted all his strength and suddenly released more than 30 blades of divine light toward the God-Slayer worship. The 100 or so god kings behind him also joined forces to unleash secret arts, filling the sky with light and shadows that rained down like a torrential downpour. The monarch of Jadefall was piloting the God-Slayer worship, looking around to see if there was anything out of the ordinary. He had never thought that there would be a sudden attack from the empty sea of clouds behind the battleship. The two sides were too close. By the time he sensed the danger, it was already too late to dodge. At this critical moment, only the God-Slayer worship's barrier of divine light could block those attacks. Bam! 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 In the next instant, the sky full of divine light and sharp blades slammed into the God-Slayer worship's barrier of divine light, creating a deafening explosion. The barrier of divine light shook violently from the impact. Dense cracks appeared on its surface, and countless fragments of divine light flew out. The attacks of the beast race godly monarchs did not cause much damage. However, the monarch of Jadefall's attacks were too sharp and immediately shattered the barrier of the God-Slayer worship. The powerful impact caused the God-Slayer worship to deviate several hundred kilometers to the right. The monarch of Jadefall reacted quickly. Without hesitation, he controlled the God-Slayer worship to form a new barrier. At the same time, he also woke up his master, who was cultivating in seclusion. After receiving the news, Ji Tianqing hurriedly left the distorted spacetime and appeared in the cockpit of the God-Slayer worship. He had already mentally prepared himself and guessed that he would very likely encounter the monarch of Jadefall and the monarch of Jadefall in the next few days. Since the monarch of Jadefall had woken him up in such a hurry, it went without saying that the monarch of God Emperor had attacked them. As expected, Ji Tianqing scanned with his divine sense and discovered the monarch of Jadefall and the 100 or so god kings behind him. Without another word, he ordered the monarch of Jadefall to steer the God-Slayer worship north. He charged out of the God-Slayer worship and summoned the Sword of Burial of Heaven, charging toward the monarch of Jadefall with killing intent. Chapter 4796. Ji Tianqing had long since guessed that Jadefall and Illusionary Overlord would work together to kill him. Although he could only detect Jadefall's presence, he didn't sense Illusionary Overlord's presence. However, he guessed that Illusionary Overlord should be on his way here and would arrive soon. Thus, he didn't want to waste time with Jadefall. He immediately attacked and had the God-Slayer battleship speed up. As long as the God-Slayer battleship could escape safely, he was confident that he could escape quickly and shake off Jadefall. This was the right decision. Ji Tianqing brandished the Burial of Heaven and used a divine art. He clashed with Jadefall and sent him flying back nearly 50 kilometers. Over 100 beast race deity kings surrounded Ji Tianqing, unleashing all sorts of divine arts to attack him. However, Ji Tianqing easily blocked the attack and remained unharmed. He casually punched out a mountain-sized dragon-elephant fist shadow, and then swung out a sword light, and those beast race god kings were beaten to a pulp. After exchanging 2 more blows, over 30 beast race god kings had been slain, and close to 40 beast race god kings had been heavily injured. Suzerain Jadefall was going all out, and yet, she was no match for Ji Tianqing. After 3 exchanges, she didn't even gain the upper hand. Her face was ashen, and her aura was weak as she was sent flying back 100 kilometers. He knew he wasn't Ji Tianqing's match, so he didn't dare fight Ji Tianqing head-on. He could only try his best to stall Ji Tianqing and buy time for Illusionary Overlord to arrive. He silently prayed that Illusionary Overlord would come to his aid before all his guards were killed. Clearly, the 100 or so guards around him were nothing more than cannon fodder to stall for time. However, Ji Tianqing saw through Jadefall's intentions with a single glance. Seeing that it was no longer fighting head-on, but was blindly wandering and circling around, he decisively withdrew. In any case, the God-Slayer battleship was already 80,000 kilometers away. Neither Jadefall nor the Beast Race God Kings could easily catch up. Shwa! Ji Tianqing transformed into a stream of light and tore through the sky, chasing after the God-slaying battleship. However, after 3 breaths, his expression changed. To the front and right of the God-slaying battleship, there was a dazzling divine light that was rapidly approaching from about 100,000 kilometers away. Many figures were wrapped in the divine light, and there was also a powerful divine power aura. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to probe the divine light and immediately realized that it was most likely the illusory overlord. He had already guessed this would happen, but he did not expect the illusionary overlord to come so quickly. As he sped up and chased after the God-slaying battleship, many thoughts flashed through his mind. Even if Jadefall and Su Sheng are working together, they shouldn't be this close to each other. They must have split up to investigate my whereabouts. After exchanging a few blows with Lord Jadefall, Lord Illusionary arrived in less than 10 breaths of time. Things weren't as simple as they seemed. Jadefall had probably discovered the God-Slayer battleship long ago and sent a message to Jadefall Overlord. However, he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he concealed his presence and stealthily followed behind the God-slaying battleship. With White Dragon's strength, it was impossible for him to detect Jadefall's presence. Only when Jadefall Overlord arrived and was very close did Jadefall decide to make a move. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing guessed the reason and deduced Jadefall's strategy. He also realized that Jadefall and Jadefall were stronger and more capable than the previous 3 overlords. They would definitely be more difficult to deal with. White Dragon steered the God-slaying battleship away from the battlefield. After shaking off Jadefall and the Beast Race God Kings, he slowed down. He was waiting for his master to return. Once his master entered the battleship, they would leave together. In just a few breaths of time, Ji Tianqing caught up to the God-slaying battleship. White Dragon had thought that his master would enter the battleship and appear in the control room. He had already made preparations. When his master appeared behind him, he would have the God-slaying battleship accelerate at full speed. However, Ji Tianqing didn't enter the battleship, nor did he stop. Instead, he sped up and flew forward. He even used a teleportation technique to move 30,000 kilometers away, pulling away from the God-slaying battleship. White Dragon was somewhat puzzled. He wanted to ask his master what was going on. At that moment, a dazzling divine light appeared in the sky 60,000 kilometers away. Many tall figures could be vaguely seen amidst the dazzling multicolored light, as well as violent fluctuations of divine power. White Dragon paused, then understood his master's intentions. That's another beast overlord, Jadefall. That's right, it's working with Jadefall. It's rushing over to help. Master was afraid that I wouldn't know and would be attacked by Jadefall again, so he sped up and rushed ahead. With White Dragon's intelligence, he immediately understood the crux of the matter. However, he was somewhat worried and couldn't help but furrow his brow. He had full confidence in his master's ability to deal with Jadefall and Jadefall alone. However, with 2 beast overlords working together and leading a group of beast godly monarchs, he couldn't be sure of the outcome. However, now wasn't the time to think about these problems. Since the enemy was already in front of him, his master had to meet them. The battle was about to begin. The only thing White Dragon could do was focus, activate the battleship's divine robe, and prepare to attack. Whoosh! 360 cannon barrels extended from both sides of the battleship. Dazzling divine light lit up within them, accumulating violent power. At the same time, the divine robe locked onto the divine light tens of thousands of kilometers away, ready to attack at any time. Break! Ji Tianqing was still 10,000 kilometers away from the divine light. He let out a cold shout, swinging the barrier of heaven to attack first. He used his ultimate technique, sword piercing the 9 heavens. He released a giant golden sword that was 3,000 meters long and slashed at the divine light. The divine light enveloped over 1,000 tall figures. They were the Jade Fall Overlord and 1,000 beast god kings. The Jade Fall Overlord was the strongest of the 5 overlords. He had condensed 6 Taoist rhymes and had over 90,000 years of cultivation. He looked like a black cloud the size of a mountain, but in reality, he looked a bit like a black bear with 3 hooves and a single horn on his forehead. He had a large bloody mouth and looked quite menacing. Seeing Ji Tianqing attack first, the Jade Fall Overlord roared angrily and released vast amounts of divine power, making the divine light barrier even more solid. This wasn't just to protect himself, but also to protect the 1,000 beast god kings behind him. He wasn't afraid of sacrificing his beast god kings, but not now. In the next moment, the giant golden sword that was thousands of feet long slashed at the divine light shield with a loud boom that spread for tens of thousands of miles. This wasn't surprising. The giant golden sword shattered and turned into specks of golden light. That giant divine light barrier was also shattered into pieces. 7017K. Chapter 4797. After the divine light shattered, thousands of shards of divine light fell from the sky, dazzling and dazzling. The illusionary ruler and the 1,000 beast race god kings under its command lost the protection of the divine light and were exposed to the sky. Ji Tianqing did not hide his presence or aura because he did not want to scatter his divine power. He wanted to unleash his greatest power and crush the illusionary ruler and the 1,000 beast race god kings under its command head-on. Only by carving out a path of blood and never looking back would he be able to lead everyone out of the encirclement of the 2 beast race lords. Apocalyptic Sword. Ji Tianqing had just slashed apart the barrier of divine light and dispelled the defenses of the illusionary ruler and the beast race god kings when he used a trump card to attack the illusionary ruler. The golden sword of light that was hundreds of thousands of feet long appeared and locked onto the illusionary ruler with an unstoppable momentum as it slashed down from the sky. At this moment, it was as if the sun was hanging in the sky, shining with boundless golden light. Everything within tens of thousands of miles was illuminated in a dazzling light. The supreme divine might and heaven-reaching sword intent filled the beast race god kings with fear and made them tremble. Unfortunately, their strength was too low. They could not block this sword, nor could they dodge it. At this critical moment, they could only rely on their lord. When the illusionary ruler sensed the might of the apocalyptic sword, its first reaction was to dodge and run. It knew very well that it could not block this sword. If it was struck, it would be heavily injured even if it did not die. However, it might not be able to dodge, and even if it did, the beast race god kings behind it would suffer heavy casualties. Thus, the illusionary ruler did not hesitate and made the wisest choice. It released several mountain-sized balls of light. There were flames, lightning, and even inky blue balls of light. They contained thousands of divine Tao laws and 3 types of Tao energy. The 3 massive balls of light were like cannonballs as they slammed toward the apocalyptic sword. At the same time, the 1,000 beast race god kings worked together to form a massive shield of light under its lead. It was not a barrier of divine light but a wall-like shield of light that blocked in front of everyone to block the might of the apocalyptic sword. Bang! 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 In the next moment, the 3 huge balls of light smashed into the Armageddon sword, creating a deafening sound. The sword of annihilation that was tens of thousands of feet long was not defeated. It continued to move forward courageously. Like a giant blade that could split the sky and earth, it slashed down towards the crowd. However, the 3 balls of light were shattered. Millions of fragments of divine light splashed out like a torrential flood, pouring down towards the ground, mountains, and rivers. Boom! The Armageddon sword, whose power had been weakened by 30%, struck the light shield with a loud bang, causing another earth-shattering explosion. The five-colored light shield was shattered on the spot, exploding with dazzling divine light like fireworks. The power of the World Destroyer sword decreased by another 20%, and the light became much dimmer. However, the Armageddon sword, which still had half of its power, slashed into the crowd, causing a bloodbath. At least half of the beast god kings were affected. They were struck by the giant golden sword and struck by the destructive sword Qi. Another 300 or so beast god kings were killed on the spot. Not even their corpses remained. The other 100 or so beast god kings were heavily injured by the giant sword. Some of them had lost limbs, and their bodies were drenched in blood. The illusionary lord, who bore the brunt of the attack, did not fare any better than the god kings under its command. It bore most of the power of the giant sword. Its protective divine light was shattered, and its entire left leg was severed. If only its left front leg was severed, it could still pick up the severed leg and find an opportunity to reattach it in the future. However, the sword intent of the Armageddon sword was too violent. It blew its entire severed leg to smithereens, causing blood to rain down. The heavily injured illusionary lord let out a furious roar of pain, but it was drowned out by the deafening sound. Apart from the wounds on its body, there was also an extremely sharp sword Qi that entered its body through the wounds. It was rampaging through its body, slicing its meridians and bones. The heart-wrenching pain caused the illusionary lord to tremble. It could not help but let out a series of screams. It had no time to save the beast god kings. It hurriedly circulated its divine power to suppress its injuries and expel the sword Qi in its body. Just a moment ago, these beast god kings had been brimming with killing intent. They had formed a battle formation with over 1,000 of them. Who would have thought that Ji Tianqing would only use a single move to beat them into a pulp, leaving them in such a miserable state? 80,000 kilometers away, the Duke of Jade Heaven and several dozen beast god kings witnessed this scene with their own eyes. Their hearts were filled with shock and disbelief. They had never imagined that a mid-stage god emperor stage foreign youth would be able to unleash such terrifying power. Fortunately, the sword god did not use this move when dealing with them previously. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. With this in mind, the Duke of Jade Heaven broke out in a cold sweat. At this moment, the white dragon saw that his master had slashed open a massive hole in the beast god tribe battle formation. The surviving beast race god kings, including the illusionary horde lord, were all busy treating the injured. It was a complete mess. If they didn't escape now, when would they? The white dragon also believed that his master would rather him escape with the battleship than stay behind and fight alongside him. Whoosh! And so, the white dragon controlled the god-slaying battleship. It glowed with dazzling divine light as it pushed its speed to the limit and charged toward the hole. Ji Tianqing was swinging the sword of burial of heaven to launch a second attack. When he saw the white dragon's actions, he thought to himself, "This child is worth teaching." Just as the white dragon thought, this was exactly his plan. In front of him was the illusionary lord and several hundred beast god kings. Behind him was the Duke of Jade Heaven and several dozen god kings. Once he was surrounded, even if he did not die, he would be held back. The best choice was to take advantage of this opportunity to escape. The god-slaying battleship turned into a streak of light and crossed 10,000 kilometers. It was about to pass through the hole. At this critical moment, the illusionary lord's aura was locked onto by Ji Tianqing and was about to be struck by a few more devastating sword Qi. The illusionary lord had no spare energy to stop the god-slaying battleship. As for the several hundred beast god kings, most of them were filled with fear and panic. They had yet to recover from their shock. Helpless, the illusionary lord could only use all his strength to neutralize Ji Tianqing's attacks. He roared and issued an order. "Stop that battleship for this emperor." The illusionary lord recognized that Ji Tianqing was Kenshin, the legendary chosen one. Logically speaking, the illusionary lord and the Duke of Jade Heaven only needed to capture Kenshin and ignore that battleship. However, the two lords had complex thoughts and were even more shrewd. They were certain that there must be an important reason why Kenshin had personally appeared and attacked while covering that battleship's escape. Since that was the case, not only did they have to capture Kenshin, but they also had to stop that battleship and capture it in one fell swoop. /book_15878/Path of Immortality. Chapter 4798. Among the hundreds of beast race god kings, there were more than 200 who reacted quickly. When they heard the illusionary overlord's roar, they charged toward the god-slaying battleship without any regard for their own safety. Some used their ultimate skills, while others used their powerful bodies to form a line of defense to block the god-slaying battleship. Bam! 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 Boom! Boom! First, a sky full of divine arts slammed into the god-slaying battleship, causing the divine light barrier to shake violently. Then, the god-slaying battleship crashed into the hundreds of beast race god kings, creating a series of loud booms. Many beast race god kings were sent flying. Their massive bodies were mangled, and their limbs were severed. Blood and flesh flew everywhere in the sky. Many beast race members let out heart-wrenching cries. Aside from the hundreds of beast race members who were injured, more than 30 beast race god kings were smashed to pieces on the spot, dying on the spot. Unfortunately, no matter how strong the god-slaying battleship was, it was unable to break through the barrier formed by the beast race god kings. After the massive impact was neutralized, the god-slaying battleship stopped in the sky for a few seconds. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the hundreds of beast race god kings swarmed forward and formed a circle, surrounding the god-slaying battleship. They used all kinds of divine arts and spells to attack the god-slaying battleship like a storm. The white dragon could only control the array formation to reform the divine light barrier and activate the divine cannons to launch a counterattack. Fortunately, there were not too many of them. Although the god-slaying battleship was under pressure, it was not defeated. The white dragon was also able to deal with them calmly. On the other side, the battle between Ji Tianqing and the illusionary overlord became more and more intense. The illusionary overlord was constantly injured, and his injuries worsened. He was forced to retreat again and again, and could only fight as he fled. The battlefield was split into two. On one side, hundreds of beast race members surrounded the god-slaying battleship. On the other side, Ji Tianqing and the illusionary overlord were fighting fiercely. If this was the end of the battle, Ji Tianqing's side would definitely be victorious. Once he defeated or killed the illusionary overlord, it would be easy for him to rescue the god-slaying battleship. However, Jadefall overlord quickly arrived, followed by a few dozen beast race god kings. Jadefall overlord's goal was clear after joining the battle. She went straight for Ji Tianqing, joining forces with Void Fiend Overlord to attack Ji Tianqing. The dozens of beast race god kings behind it charged towards the god-slaying battleship. They quickly joined the encirclement and began to attack. The tide of the battle quickly turned. The god-slaying battleship continued to defend with all its might, blocking the attacks of the many beasts and looking for opportunities to counterattack. Ji Tianqing was besieged by Azure Sky Overlord and Ethereal Overlord. His momentum was restrained, and he could only fight steadily. The pressure on the illusory Overlord was greatly reduced. He finally had a chance to suppress his injuries and no longer had to retreat. The battle continued for another 10 breaths of time. Ji Tianqing had used his ultimate skills several times, but he still failed to injure Bai Luo and the illusory Overlord. If this situation continued, the battle would fall into a stalemate, and it would be difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. This was the situation that Ji Tianqing was most unwilling to see. The longer this battle dragged on, the greater the chance that the Pantheon of Immortality and Taiyu Shrine would have of catching up. There had to be a breakthrough point or an opportunity to turn the tide of the battle. Thus, the god-slaying battleship that was besieged by several hundred beast race god kings lit up with divine light. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! 3 divine lights flashed, and 3 beautiful figures charged out of the battleship. They were 3 peerlessly beautiful women, and all of them had God Emperor stage power. They were none other than Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the Prajna God Emperor. After the 3 of them charged out of the battleship, Yun Yao and Ji Ku waved their divine weapons and began to attack the surrounding beast race god kings. The Prajna God Emperor charged out of the encirclement and charged toward Jadefall Overlord and Ethereal Overlord. The appearance of the 3 god emperors changed the tide of the battle. The several hundred beast race god kings also let out cries of surprise. Yun Yao and Ji Ku unleashed their full power and unleashed all kinds of divine abilities. Sword lights and divine flames filled the sky as they rained down on the beast race god kings. Instantly, the beast race god kings became bloodied and blood-curdling screams filled the air. Dozens of beast race god kings were sliced into pieces by the sword lights before being burned to ashes by the divine flames. Their divine bodies were shattered, and their godheads were also destroyed as they scattered across the ruined battlefield. The several hundred beast race god kings were all stunned. Horror appeared on their faces as they instinctively retreated. The pressure on the god-slaying battleship was greatly reduced, and the White Dragon took advantage of this opportunity to activate its divine cannons and blast out more than 300 divine light beams. Boom boom boom. The divine light beams blasted into the beast race god kings, creating a series of loud booms as their flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Yun Yao and Ji Ku's faces were as cold as ice, and their killing intent soared to the sky. They kept swinging their swords and divine spears to reap the lives of the beast race god kings. Under their attacks, no one was a match for them. Every time the sword lights and spears were unleashed, there would be a large number of casualties. The beast race god kings were unable to resist at all. On the other side, the Prajna God Emperor rushed into the sky and joined hands with Ji Tianqing to fight against the 2 beast race overlords. The Prajna God Emperor had only condensed 4 Daoist rhymes and was far weaker than the 2 beast race overlords. However, if she could join the battle, she could at least hold the 2 beast race overlords back for a while. This would greatly reduce the pressure on Ji Tianqing and give him more opportunities to counterattack. In order to end the battle quickly, Ji Tianqing took advantage of this opportunity and decisively used his Sword of Annihilation. He held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and drew upon the boundless power of the world to form a giant sword that was over 10,000 feet long. He then slashed it toward the Ethereal Overlord. As soon as the giant golden sword appeared, it was like a blazing sun hanging in the sky, illuminating tens of thousands of miles of heaven and earth with golden light. The sword light locked onto the Ethereal Overlord's aura, making it impossible for him to dodge, block, or dispel. He was already heavily injured, and now that Ji Tianqing had used him as an opening, he was naturally filled with grief and despair. Jadefall, hurry and help me block it together. He knew that he couldn't dodge that sword, so he roared loudly, hoping that Jadefall could help him share the burden and block the attack together. Jadefall's instinctive reaction was to stay away from the giant golden sword and not let himself be in danger. However, he was very wise and knew that he and the Ethereal Overlord were in a situation where one of them would prosper and the other would suffer. If he didn't help the Ethereal Overlord and allowed Kenshin to kill him, he would have to fight alone and would soon be killed by Kenshin. Therefore, Jadefall decisively chose to help the Ethereal Overlord neutralize the Sword of Annihilation. Seeing that Jadefall was charging toward him and was about to use a divine art to block the Sword of Annihilation, the Ethereal Overlord heaved a sigh of relief. He thought that as long as Jadefall worked together with him, even if they couldn't completely neutralize the sword, he would at least be able to save his life. However, Pan Ruo Divine Emperor had been waiting for this moment. She unleashed all of her abilities to stop Lord Jadefall. Chapter 4799. Although the Prajna God Emperor's attack couldn't threaten the Duke of Jadefall's life, the Duke of Jadefall had to defend himself. However, the Empress of Jadefall had to block and neutralize the attack, which delayed him for a brief moment. It was this split second that prevented the Duke of Jadefall from assisting the illusory Duke and changed the outcome of the battle. Kaboom! The World Destroyer sword carried the power to destroy everything and struck the illusory ruler, engulfing its figure. Although he'd sacrificed his lifespan to form a giant crimson barrier, the Armageddon sword's power was too overwhelming. However, the power of the Armageddon sword was simply too terrifying. It easily shattered the blood-red barrier and then struck the Armageddon sword. The illusory Duke of Jadefall had cultivated for over 90,000 years. His divine body had been tempered countless times and was extremely tough. However, all of this was futile before the Armageddon sword's power. Accompanied by a loud rumbling sound, its enormous body was chopped into two halves on the spot. Blood and pieces of flesh splattered all over the sky. Not only did his body shatter, but even his godhead was destroyed on the spot. It exploded into a dozen fragments and scattered across the sky. The deafening explosion continued to reverberate between heaven and earth. The destructive shockwaves, wrapped in countless fragments of divine light, spread out in all directions, like ripples after ripples. The illusory Duke of Jadefall died on the spot. Fragments of his body and godhead were still floating in the air. This scene stunned the Duke of Jadefall and the several hundred god kings of the beast race. They were all petrified and dumbfounded. They couldn't believe that the most powerful illusory Duke of Jadefall had been killed by Kenshin just like that. There had been no warning at all. That earth-shattering strike had killed the illusory Duke of Jadefall. This was simply too inconceivable. The Duke of Jadefall and the several hundred god kings of the beast race were all aghast. After witnessing Ji Tianqing's terrifying power, their battle intent quickly dissipated. They wanted to retreat. In fact, the illusory Duke of Jadefall's death wasn't without warning. It wasn't like Ji Tianqing had killed him in a single strike. After all, the illusory overlord had condensed 6 Taoist rhymes and had a strong foundation. Previously, when Ji Tianqing fought it alone, it was already riddled with wounds and its divine power was weakened. Just now, it was already heavily injured, and its combat strength had dropped by nearly 50%. Thus, when the apocalyptic sword slashed down, it was within reason that he was instantly killed. While Jadefall and the several hundred god kings were still in a daze, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and put away Jadefall's quintessence fragment. Then, he charged towards the god-slaying battleship with the Prajna God Emperor in tow. He swung his sword and unleashed sword lights that filled the sky as he charged towards the few hundred beast race god kings. Those beast race godly kings couldn't even defeat Yun Yao and Ji Ku. More than 100 of them had already been killed. When they saw Ji Tianqing kill the illusory overlord with a single strike, they were stunned and scared out of their wits. At this moment, Ji Tianqing and Prajna God Emperor were charging towards them. How could they dare to resist? Naturally, they scattered and fled in all directions like their lives depended on it. Ji Tianqing's original intention wasn't to kill the beast race godly kings, but to drive them away. Since the several hundred beast race godly kings had fled, he, the Prajna God Emperor, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku escorted the god-slaying battleship to the north. Yun Yao and Ji Ku were the first to enter the battleship. The White Dragon pushed the battleship's speed to the limit and rushed towards the north, leaving the battlefield behind. Ji Tianqing and the Prajna God Emperor brought up the rear, vigilantly monitoring Jadefall's every move. In the blink of an eye, the god-slaying battleship had traveled 40,000 miles and gradually disappeared into the distance. Jadefall had long regained its senses. Staring at the god-slaying battleship and Ji Tianqing, its heart was in turmoil. Originally, its first reaction was to chase after Kenshin and try to kill him no matter what. However, the godly kings of the beast race had already been killed. The several hundred beast race godly kings were its subjects and had fled in all directions. The remaining 30 or so beast race godly kings were the true subordinates of Jadefall. It was well aware that it and the 30 or so godly kings under its command were no match for Kenshin. Forget about capturing Kenshin, once the two sides started fighting, it would be killed in less than 100 breaths of time by Kenshin. Jadefall's first thought was to defend or flee with the remaining 30 or so godly kings. As long as Kenshin and the Prajna God Emperor charged over, it would definitely turn tail and flee without hesitation. However, it didn't expect Kenshin to have no intention of pursuing after killing the godly kings. Instead, he escorted the battleship to the north. Jadefall heaved a sigh of relief. At the very least, it was out of danger for the time being. However, it was unwilling to just watch Kenshin disappear into the distance. It had sacrificed so much blood, sweat, and tears. It was so close to capturing Kenshin, but in the end, this was the result. How could it swallow this anger? But what could it do even if it was unwilling? Chase after him and throw away its life? Jadefall's heart was in turmoil. After a moment of hesitation, it still chose to follow. It would be too humiliating to turn tail and flee. It was better to keep a distance from Kenshin and observe the situation. With that in mind, Jadefall led the 30 beast race godly kings north, maintaining a distance of 50,000 kilometers from Kenshin. Ji Tianxing and the Prajna God Emperor escorted the god-slaying battleship. After flying 80,000 kilometers north, the two entered the ship. The White Dragon drove the god-slaying battleship forward while Ji Tianxing and Prajna prepared to return to the distorted spacetime to cultivate. The Prajna God Emperor was a bit worried. That guy is still following us and maintaining a distance of 50,000 kilometers. What do we do? If we ignore it and return to the distorted spacetime, will anything happen? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, nothing will happen. There were 5 beast overlords in this unknown land, and I've already killed 4 of them. There was only one Azure Sky Overlord left, and he had more than 30 beast race god kings under his command. What could they do? I just didn't want to waste time. Otherwise, I would have killed it long ago. It's just that it's not willing to give up, and it definitely won't dare to attack us again. According to my estimation, it will follow us for a while longer. After it calms down, it will leave." In fact, Ji Tianxing's guess was completely correct. The Empress of Jadefall gradually calmed down and made up her mind. She would follow Yang Qi for a bit longer before leaving. However, the world was always unpredictable. Both parties flew for another 200,000 miles. Then, a stream of light appeared in the sky behind them. It was as fast as lightning. Neither the Godslayer battleship nor the Monarch of Jadefall were slow. However, that streak of light was even faster, and the distance between it and them was gradually closing. It was impossible to see what was in the meteor-like divine light, but the aura of the God Emperor was very obvious. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.